Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is taken in by Sarutobi to be his chosen successor to the mantle of Hokage. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The fox was gone, non-existent, like it had never been there. The yandane was gone as well, his spirit departed for the belly of the Shinigami. He left behind a wife who followed him into the abyss and a son only a few hours old that he had entrusted to jail the most fearsome of beasts. Truly, it was a sad day in Konohagakure. Old Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, stood with a small blonde baby in his arms. The babe slept soundly, unmindful of the gathering of elders that were assembled to decide his fate. Sarutobi did not know why the fools had even gathered. The boy's fate was already decided, and Sarutobi meant to keep his destiny unaltered. He listened as the council bickered back and forth, some for killing the baby, some for saving it, honoring the wishes of their dead Hokage. This was a trying time for the village and patience was running thin. Even for one of infinite patience like Sarutobi. He never had to raise his voice before to get a point across. One does not attain the title God of Shinobi by being loud and spontaneous. Ninja are calm, collected, silent, and deadly. All these things encompassed what Sarutobi stood for. What set him apart from the pack was his high level of intelligence. And that intelligence would grant him a successor and save the village in this time and in future times. No one noticed as he rose from his seat, the babe still sleeping peacefully in his arms. Enough. Be silent. The room quieted immediately, and even the small bundle in his arms woke and stared at him reverently. But no sound did it make. He smiled down at the blonde wonder, and then turned his gaze back to the council. I have sat and listened to your nonsense long enough. This child will not be slain. He will not be made into a mindless weapon. He will not be used. He is a child of Konoha and he holds within him the most powerful of beasts. He deserves our respect above all. A nameless council member, one of the civilians, rose. But Lord Hokage, the Kyuubi could break free at any moment. Knowledge of the seal says that its soul is bound to the boy's and that upon the boy's death it will die with him. Would it not be best to kill him now and avoid any future issues? Sarutobi narrowed his eyes at the civilian and spoke in a level voice. This child shall not be killed. His own life is a sacrifice. The yandane chose him to hold the Kyuubi, and he believed that his people would see this boy for what he is. And what is he? A hero. A Jinchuriki. He is a living sacrifice and a living testament to a human's tenacious hold on life. I myself will ensure that this boy serves Konoha. I might love the people of this village, but if the leaders themselves can't tell the difference between a harmless child and the most murderous of all demons, then how can I trust the villagers to let him live a peaceful life? He lifted the child and held it out for all to see. The blonde babe giggled and flapped its arms merrily. Sarutobi allowed a small smile to cross his face. Now then, look upon this child and tell me where the malice is. Where is the unbridled hatred and rage that the Kyuubi exuded? Where is the fear that should be present in all of you if he were the Kyuubi? But it could be a trick of the Kyuubi to lure us into false hope. It could be pretending to be harmless. Sarutobi frowned and wrapped the baby back up in its swaddling clothes. And how exactly is that child different from any other newborn? What newborn doesn't look upon the world with wondering eyes? This baby has been born into a cold, harsh world on the worst night of our village's history. For this, he will be ostracized and hated if he is allowed to mingle amongst the villagers, and I will not have that. I will ensure the boy grows to be a ninja of exceptional quality. I will ensure that he is pure of heart and loyal to the village. And how do you mean to ensure all that? Sarutobi smiled at the speaker. Of course, it would be the old war hawk Danzo. How he hated the man. What he said next would make or break the boy's future, but he would not back down. This baby, this small little blonde child you see before you, is my chosen successor. I will train him in the ways of the ninja and the ways of a Hokage. He will lead the village when I step down. Hyuga Hayashi rose from his seat and walked to stand in front of Sarutobi. The old man's grip on the baby grew tenser as the pale-eyed man gazed down at the infant. The babe stared up into Hayashi's eyes with wonder and reached out with small hands towards the man's face. Hayashi's gaze softened and he stuck a finger out for the little child to latch onto. It gripped the digit and cooed happily. And Hayashi smiled, shocking those gathered. I see that you have chosen a strong child indeed to be your successor, Lord Hokage. I, Hyuga Hayashi, will trust your decision and will help you in any way I can. To Sarutobi's surprise, the rest of the clan heads stood and offered their support, all except Uchiha Fugaku. He voiced his opinion that he would not support such an endeavor and that the rest were fools. Seeing that he was outvoted, however, He went along with the decision reluctantly, but not without provisions. Should the child ever prove dangerous, I, along with the rest of the Uchiha clan, will not hesitate to bring him down. This I swear. The village must come before a man's wishes. Sarutobi nodded and Fugaku left the chamber without another word. He had said his piece and knew he was no longer needed. One by one, the leaders of the clans came forward to see the baby and offer their support and help should the child need training beyond what Sarutobi gave him. Once all were gone, it left just Hayashi, Hamura, Koharu, and Sarutobi. The two elder advisors to the Hokage watched as Hayashi approached Sarutobi and gazed down at the child again. Do you really intend to keep him from the village? A child needs interaction with those his age, otherwise he will grow up too quickly. You've seen how those en route and how young prodigies like Uchiha Itachi act. They have no personality at all, they're like machines. Do you intend to send the child to the academy at some point? Sarutobi rubbed his chin and looked toward the ceiling, as if it would have the answers. I have not thought that far ahead yet, truthfully. I will keep him in my household for the first few years of his life, giving him a family life and a stable environment. I will introduce a law that specifically states that those old enough to remember the Kyuubi attack will not speak of it to the younger generation, further giving him a chance at a normal life. We both know this child's life will never be normal. Sarutobi's eyes drooped and a small, sad smile came across his face. The bundle in his arms yawned and fluttered its eyes. I know that. But he deserves at least a happy home life. My family and servants will care for him when I cannot. He will at least know the love of family. He will know that, at least to a few, he is wanted. I, for one, will not let the Yandame's wishes go unnoticed. Nor will I. If you need any help, just send for me. Both men looked down at the small child and smiled sad, mournful smiles. Hayashi reached out and stroked the infant's hair. He looks just like him, you know. Yes, he does. I don't believe you ever said what his name was. Sarutobi's eyes twinkled and he pulled the baby back against his chest. His father named him Uzumaki Naruto, just before he passed on. I intend to make it a name known throughout the nations. The will of fire will burn the brightest in this young one. Hayashi nodded and left to assess the damage done to his family. Sarutobi nodded to his advisors and left for his home. He nodded to himself as he walked. Yes, this child will be the living embodiment of the will of fire. I will ensure that, come hell or high water, this child will be a legend. Sarutobi sighed as he walked in through his door. Half of his compound was demolished. Miraculously, the living quarters were untouched and thus, at least his family and servants had a place to sleep. It would take a while to rebuild the village to its former glory, but that was for another day. For the moment, he had to introduce the family's newest member to them. He silently wished his son Asuma was there at the moment, but that was neither here nor there. The servant who ushered him in smiled and looked to the bundle in his arms. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed when the man's widened and he waited for the servant to say the wrong thing. Is that him? Yes, it is. The servant got a speculative look on his face and then smiled at Sarutobi, disarming the old man's cold look. The Yandane wished him to be seen as a hero, correct? Therefore, in my eyes, he is a beloved hero. You need not fear, master. I will ensure that he is treated with respect in this household. Sarutobi smiled at his most trusted servant and nodded. I thank you for that, Aoi. It is most appreciated. Do me a favor, would you? Gather the family and all the servants to the main room. I need to introduce our newest family member. Aoi's eyes widened and he stared awestruck at the babe. You mean? Yes, he will be raised in this household. Now go, hurry. Yes, master. At once. Sarutobi sighed and took a seat as Aoi rushed off. It wouldn't be long now till the family began to file in. He readjusted the baby, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. He was old, getting on in years. He should be enjoying retirement now, not taking over the mantle he had given up only a short time ago. But there were none better qualified to take the job, and better him than some young fool who would do something stupid. Or an old war hawk who would like nothing better than to try to invade another country, even while the village was disabled. A small tear wound its way down the crevices on Sarutobi's face. It wasn't fair that one as young as Namake's Minato had died. He was in the prime of life, a new father, a loving husband, and a damn fine Hokage. But fate is a fickle mistress, and the young man had everything taken from him in an instant. All in service of a village that would just as soon see his legacy dead, his family gone, all while singing his praises. Sarutobi wondered if they ever thought of the hypocrisy of it all. His eyes opened when he heard the shuffle of feet and opened his eyes to see the face of his son, peering down at the sleeping form of Naruto. His eyes softened when he saw his son's newly-wed wife standing behind him. "Hello, you two. Come to pay your respects to an old man?" Sarutobi's son laughed and watched as his wife picked up the baby. He noticed that his father gave the child up reluctantly, no doubt because of the tension in the air surrounding the child's origins and identity. "Don't worry, father. Eri will not harm the boy. In fact, she seems rather fond of him already." "How could I not? He's so precious. And look at those cute little marks on his face. What are those, a birthmark?" Sarutobi sighed and smiled at her. "You could say that. They mark him as the container of the QB. And they'll stay with him for life." He watched as Eri tensed and held the boy at arm's length for a moment, before taking him back to her breast and stroking his feathery soft hair. "I don't care. He's just a small child that was born at the wrong time. If you need me to, I'll raise him as my own. It'll give me good practice for when Yahiko and I have our own child." Sarutobi smiled and allowed himself to relax in the plush chair, as his son and daughter-in-law cooed and lavished praise over the baby. He watched with a bemused expression as the servants filtered in one by one, and the females all took a turn holding him before he ended up back in Eri's arms. The old Hokage grunted as his bones creaked when he rose from the plushy chair and put his hands behind his back. "Now that he's been passed around a few times, I'd like to thank all of you for welcoming young Naruto to our home. He will be living here with us and will be raised among us. He is to be given the respect he deserves, but do not spoil him. Do not treat him as royalty. He is to grow to be a humble child, one filled with generosity and kindness." Yahiko turned his head to gaze at the now sleeping baby in his wife's arms. "So he is to be a Sarutobi?" "No, he is to be Uzumaki Naruto. I have decided that he will be my chosen heir for the title of Hokage." A small murmur swept the room and Aoi, ever the loyal servant, felt compelled to ask if this was the right decision. Sarutobi smiled at his most trusted servant and fished his pipe out of his pocket. "Of course it is. The boy is destined for great things, so why not the greatest thing of all? The village may not like him, may even hate him, but they will respect him. Of this I swear on our clan's name. He will be the epitome of a ninja in every way, and when he rises to take the mantle I shall raise and train him to take, he will be the best. He will surpass us all." Eri smoothed the baby's hair and grinned when he fidgeted and turned his face away. "Father, I want to raise this child. I want to show him that though the world may hate him, there are those who will always be there for him." "That's very good, Eri. You and Yahiko, along with everyone else, will show this boy love and how to be a good person." "And you, father? What will you be showing him?" "Why, Yahiko, I thought I made that clear. I will be showing him everything about being a Hokage. I plan for him to be helping me with sorting paperwork by the time he is 6 or 7, signing documents by 8, and perhaps assigning missions by the time he is 10. You can't be serious, master. He will be much too young to do such things, and what of the academy? A boy should have friends his age." "I've already thought of that, Aoi. And he will have friends his age. I believe that Hyuga Hayashi has a child due to be born soon, and it should make a wonderful playmate. The other clan heads all have children to be born soon or have already had children. Don't worry, he won't be a recluse. I'll make sure of that myself." Yahiko, while happy his father had thought this through so far, was still unsettled by one detail. "And the council? They are greedy, power-hungry fools and may attempt to harm the boy." Sarutobi's eyes flashed dangerously and Yahiko was somewhat sorry he'd spoken up. "They will do nothing. If they know what is good for them, they will leave the boy alone and under my care. Minato would want his son to be cared for, and damn it all if I won't see his wishes honored." All eyes in the household grew wide and Sarutobi cursed himself for losing his cool in an impassioned speech. Eri's eyes were the widest and most tear-filled. "So, he is the Yandame's son. He looks just like him now that I think about it. So tragic that this poor baby loses his parents, and all that is entitled to him the day he is born. And I expect you all to keep that secret. You don't want to know what the punishment may be. His father had many enemies, outside the village and within, and I won't have him pay for his father's endeavors." She sat down in a chair and held little Naruto close to her bosom as the tears streamed down her face. "It just isn't fair, father. And the fact that most of this village would rather see him dead, it sickens me." "Aye, Eri, it sickens me too. But that is why we must work to make them see his virtues and not the sins that are not his own. His life will be a constant uphill battle, and we must be there to help him every step of the way." Yahiko sat on the arm of the chair and put an arm around his wife's shoulders. To think that we would help raise a national hero's son, it's like something out of a fairy tale. The tragedy of a lost prince, orphaned at birth, who comes to be found by kind, benevolent, childless people who only want to see him raised into a fine young man. Sarutobi smiled at his son's wistful thinking. Yahiko had always been the more studious and philosophical of the two boys and was sure to instill his knowledge and love of literature into Naruto. Not that Sarutobi wouldn't beat the finer points of linguistics and books into his head by force if necessary. I'm happy to hear that you feel that way, Yahiko. Now, it is late and we must all retire for the night. Eri looked at her father-in-law with big soulful eyes. Father, may I keep him for the night? Sarutobi laughed as he headed for his room. Tomorrow would be an eventful day for Konohagakure. Of course you may, Eri. He's your son now, after all. I'll have a crib commissioned in the morning. He didn't see the smile on her face when he told her Naruto was her son, but he could literally feel the warmth on his back. Tomorrow, I must face the council again and detail my plans. Soon, this world will see the will of fire again and will know its awesome might. Sarutobi awoke the next morning feeling just a little more lighthearted than usual. Despite the obvious difficulties he would face that day, he was happy knowing that the house was livelier than normal. One would be correct in saying that the small bundle of sunshine he brought home had been a shining spot in the bleak aftermath of the Kyuubi's attack. As he walked down the halls, he nodded and smiled at the servants, who returned both gestures with an unusual flair. He wondered about that until he came to the kitchen, where Eri was feeding the baby and several bottles were stacked beside her. The poor girl looked dismayed and immediately looked to the old man for answers. She was no expert in children, but this wasn't normal. Sarutobi laughed as he took a seat and was served his breakfast. I see you've run afoul of the infamous Namake's appetite. Don't worry, dear, it's perfectly normal for him. But father, it isn't normal for a baby to eat so much. Where is he putting it all? That old familiar chuckle rumbled in Sarutobi's throat, and he wiped a tear away from his eye. Oh Eri, you just don't know yet. Wait until he learns to walk. You won't be able to keep up with him. Trust me when I say he's storing up energy for later. The girl looked skeptical but kept silent as the blonde finished off yet another bottle. She sighed as he whined, obviously for more. Sighing, she got up to make another. Hopefully, the newborn's appetite would abate with the coming years. She apparently had forgotten that the more you grow, the more you need to keep going. Sarutobi laughed with great vigor as he headed to his office. It seemed the grocery bills would be very high for the Sarutobi clan in the coming years. The old man sat eyeing them all warily as they filed in and took their seats. He glared at his unwanted rival Danzo and made a sign for the door to be shut. Standing before the assembly, he knocked out his pipe before putting in a fresh blot of tobacco and lighting it. Anything to help calm his nerves was appreciated. He took a deep draught as the smoke filled his lungs and exhaled slowly. The flavor was exquisite. Slowly, he opened his eyes and coughed to get attention. We are gathered today to address several issues. I realize that most of you have pressing matters with your clans and families, so I will not detain you long. I merely wish to say that until the village is back in order, we will suspend all missions for a while. Not for long, though, we can't afford to look too weak. Now, are there any concerns you would like to address? Inazuka-san, ever the eloquent lady, voiced her opinion. Yeah, I have one. It concerns the young pup you were carrying last night. What became of him, and what will become of him? Straight to the point as usual, Etsum? I have told you already. He is under my protection, and I am going to raise him to be a loyal Konoha ninja and my successor. As of now, I am instigating a law that will make it a crime punishable by death to mention that Naruto carries within him the Kyuubi. It will not be discussed and will not be tolerated. This will be released to the mass populace, and made so that they understand the severity of the law. I will not tolerate attacks or unnecessary enmity against my apprentice. His eyes swept the room and he leveled a glare at those he knew to be problem causers. If there are any objections to my plan, then by all means, speak now or forever hold your peace. But know this, I will not change my mind. Your grievances are duly noted, but that boy caused none of them. And you won't have to face just me. My entire household has sworn to protect the boy and raise him as one of our own. Before any could protest, Hyuga Hayashi stood and bowed his head to the Hokage. I, Hyuga Hayashi, swear upon my clan that we will honor the Yandame's wishes and protect the boy. Any help needed we will offer. I, Inazuka-san, swear upon my clan's honor that the pup will be protected. We'll teach him whatever is needed. TCH, troublesome. We of the Ino Shikacho trio offer our protection of the boy. Sarutobi raised his eyebrow at Shirkato and sighed. Do you really speak for all three of you, Nara? Yes, I do. Whatever one decides is for the best, the others will follow. And we always followed the Yandame's wishes. Sarutobi nodded and watched as the Aburames swore to protect Naruto with whatever necessary means. The lesser clans followed suit until it came to the Uchiha's. Sarutobi frowned, knowing that Fugaku was a foolish man and wouldn't offer anything. I, Uchiha Fugaku, will not offer my clan's protection to this thing. I have offered my views on this fallacy and will not offer my support to the cause. Hayashi turned cold eyes to Fugaku. So you would not honor a dead man, a Hokage and fellow ninja's last wish? That is troubling, Uchiha. Most troubling. And I say that letting that monster run loose is troubling, Hyuga. We've never seen eye to eye, so it is no surprise that we differ on this opinion. I choose to see the truth while the rest of you are blinded by this old man's optimism concerning a supposedly innocent child. But who's to say it's truly innocent? Danzo nodded to his fellow naysayer's words and gave Sarutobi a smirk. It would be tough to wiggle out of that argument. Sarutobi, much to his chagrin, didn't look rattled in the least. Tell me, Fugaku, did you trust the Yandame? Yes. Did you believe in him as a leader? Yes. Did you believe him a more capable leader than me? Without doubt. Your time has passed. I see. So you believed in the Yandame, followed his rule when he was alive, but failed to trust him in death. Fugaku looked confused and asked what Sarutobi meant. That seal was designed by our beloved Yandame Hokage, and as such, it would fall to reason that you would trust in the man to know what he is doing. You have just contradicted yourself, Fugaku. You claim to trust the man and yet you don't trust him. Which is it? Fugaku was absolutely livid. He looked to Danzo for support but found none as the man was gazing intently ahead of himself. He gritted his teeth and bowed his head to the Hokage. I trust in the Yandame, but my decision stands firm. I will not help this child further his development. You will receive no help from the Uchiha clan. As long as you don't hinder his growth, I will ask for none. Now, are there any other objections to my plan? Yes, even though it's troublesome. What of the boy's social development? If he is to be a Hokage, he will need to interact with and develop bonds with people his age and earn the trust of the villagers. Nara, I will not lie. The villagers will be a difficult task. However, I would ask all the clans that have agreed to help to allow the boy into your homes and not to ostracize him. Allow him to play and interact with your children and allow friendship to blossom. Let him learn what he can from you, see the different ways of families, allow him into your hearts. My daughter-in-law has already taken him in as hers. He chuckled before speaking again. I would suggest you not to make her angry by being mean to her child. You all know how mothers get when their children are wrongfully abused. The gathered council members chuckled at the weak joke and Sarutobi clapped his hands, signifying the end of that particular business. Now that that's taken care of, let's move on to other topics, such as the rebuilding of certain quarters. Sarutobi arrived home late that night, completely tired out. The populace had been ecstatic that he'd been renamed Hokage, as he was a familiar face and they already knew how his rule would go. He was a kind, soft-spoken man and had an infinite well of patience. He smiled when he saw Eri trying to calm a frantic Naruto, shushing him and cradling him. Hello there, Eri, you seem to be quite distraught. What seems to be the problem? The girl looked up at him distressed. Oh, thank goodness you're home, father. I can't get Naruto to calm down. He just won't quit crying. What do I do? Let me have him. Have you checked his diaper? Yes, it's dry. Has he been fed? She gave him an exasperated look and sighed. The boy eats more than half this household. I bet he went through a whole gallon of milk today. Have you tried to lull him to sleep? Father, please. I've tried everything. Allow me to try this. Sarutobi sat in a chair, cradling the hysterical Naruto in his arms and formed a few hand signs as Eri watched. She sat enraptured as wind picked up and began to blow around the baby, caressing his cheeks and hair, and a small whistling tune played around his ear. She watched in awe as his crying stopped and his eyes began to droop. He kept opening and closing his mouth until Sarutobi took a pacifier and popped it into his mouth. He grew concerned when he heard a slight popping sound and pulled it out of the baby's mouth and eyed it carefully. Puncture marks? He looked over at Eri and smiled. I believe he's teething. That's the problem. You'll need to invest in something for him to chew on tomorrow. Her eyes widened and she lifted his lips back to expose the tips of two pointy white molars where his canines should be. But father, he shouldn't be teething this early. It isn't natural. No, it's not. But neither is it natural for a baby to hold the most powerful beast ever. I can only imagine what surprises he'll hold in store for us in the future. This is just one of them. Perhaps he will even manifest a bloodline not seen for centuries. A bloodline? Which one? Sarutobi turned his eyes to his daughter and smiled. One that is based entirely on stealth and is one of the greatest ever seen. I can only hope that the dormant genes required for it come forward in him. What did it do? Well, records are sketchy and I'll need to research to find out if it's even possible, but Minato's wife told me one time that her family had a most peculiar bloodline that went back to the beginning of the ninjas. Wait, Minato had a wife? Aye, and she was most beautiful. But that is for another time. I do remember the name of the bloodline, however. What is it? His eyes twinkled and he grinned at the baby sleeping in his arms. She called it the melt. Naruto grew quickly and happily in the Sarutobi household, and the family was better off for it. His mother and father were devoted to raising him right. At age 1 he was toddling around the house, getting into all kinds of trouble. To Eri's distress, his appetite only grew with his age and there were several instances where she had to send a servant to the market while he was still being fed. The little boy's 2 teeth had come in fully at the age of 6 months and at first, everyone was alarmed that they were fangs. Yahiko had put it best by bluntly spurting out, "He looks like a goddamn vampire." Sarutobi could only guess that it was part of the influence of having the QB sealed within him, a defense mechanism that, even while he was still technically defenseless, if someone stuck a finger near his mouth they'd be pulling back a punctured digit. The boy had quite the jaw power for a babe. Year 2 saw the bundle of perpetual energy running the entire Sarutobi compound ragged. If he didn't want to be caught, he wasn't going to be caught. He didn't sleep, he took power naps and then was back on his feet. By then he had gotten all of his teeth and was eating solids, creating an even larger food bill. Sarutobi was just glad that his family was provided for by the village. If they were to ever wonder why his food stipend was so large, they'd be outraged. The boy ate like a horse, and what pocket dimension he stored the food in was beyond the aging Hokage. In his 3rd year he had begun to meet the other children of the clans. As if by some miracle, or Kishimoto's plot-driven, backwards-assed, Uchiha-loving mind, all the clan heads had produced heirs at around the same time. Naruto's first stop with his parents and grandfather was the Hyuga household, where he met Neji and Hinata. Neji was a polite little boy, always smiling, even though he had received the cursed seal. His cousin Hinata was a shy girl by nature and had hidden behind her father's legs when the Sarutobis walked in with Naruto. Her world had been filled with dreariness and brunettes, pale skin and impassive faces. An inquisitive, energetic blonde-haired boy with tan skin and whisker marks was a wonder of the world to her. Sarutobi had ushered him forward toward the little girl and smiled down. "Go on, tell her your name." The blonde had smiled, showing off his fangs and making the little girl cock her head in awe. It was like the sun had walked in. "Naruto. Who you?" She had looked down at the ground, finding her toes very interesting at the moment. "Hinata." Neji had approached him as well, out of curiosity. Hizashi had tried to catch him, but he was already too far gone. Naruto saw the boy approaching and turned to him with a million-watt smile. "Who you?" "I'm Neji." Naruto squinted his eyes and pointed at Neji's bandaged forehead. "Boo-boo?" "No." Naruto grinned again and latched onto Hinata's hand. "Wanna play?" Sarutobi chuckled as the three toddled outside, throwing a ball back and forth. Hizashi attempted to apologize for Neji's abruptness, but was stopped by Hayashi. "Let them be children for a while, Hizashi. It won't be long until we won't be able to watch them play." To say Hizashi was stunned was an understatement. His brother was usually cold toward him, and Neji. He'd expected worse. Sarutobi just smiled. Naruto had that effect on people. The other children were just as easy to get along with. Kiba was just as energetic as Naruto, and the golden-haired child loved going to the Inuzuka compound to play with the dogs. He'd vehemently decreed that he wanted a Niken, but Sarutobi told him no. The boy had pouted for a solid week until his grandfather whacked him over the head with a rolled-up newspaper and told him to be a big boy. The Aburames were another interesting group to him. Shino didn't talk much, but Naruto did enough blabbering for both of them. The bug users were always happy to have him over, especially since he sometimes brought them bugs he'd found. The Inishikacho trio were usually found together at one house or another. They loved having Naruto around. He was naturally inquisitive, and Shikamaru found him a natural for board games, even if they were child games. Chuji was ecstatic to find someone who ate as much as he did. Ino was happy to have another boy to boss around. She enjoyed being the queen bee. Naruto's fourth year found a few changes in his carefree life, however. Hisashi, a man he had come to like immensely, was gone not long after he had met him. He had sacrificed himself to save his village and family, and several changes had occurred in the Hyuga family as a result. Niji, for one, had become introverted and never wanted to play anymore. Hinata had become shyer because of the pressure put on her, but whenever Naruto was around, she would perk up. He was her best, and only, friend in the world, and he never ceased to cheer her up. His other friends didn't have as much time to play anymore either, as their parents began to inundate them into their clan's jutsus and training regimens. The last time he had seen them all was at a party to celebrate his grandfather's birthday. Imagine his surprise when, the day after his 4th birthday, his grandfather appeared before him, not with his usual kind smile, but that of a man on a mission. "Come with me, Naruto. Your training for your future begins today. I've waited long enough." Naruto stood and followed his grandfather without question. Once they were on the grounds behind the house, he felt compelled to ask why they were out there. Sarutobi sighed heavily and knelt down to eye level. "There are several truths that I will have to share with you at some point, Naruto, but I can't right now. You're simply too young for what I have to tell you. However, that does not mean I won't start preparing you for the task I have set for you." "What am I going to be doing?" "I'm going to train you to be a Hokage, Naruto. I'm going to train you to take over my job when I'm done." Naruto's eyes went wide. He didn't know what all his grandfather did, but he was a widely loved and respected man. Everywhere they went, people bowed and spoke in reverent tones to the man. He couldn't do whatever the man did. He wasn't good enough. Sarutobi saw the doubt in the young boy's eyes and grabbed him by the shoulders. "I know you're young, Naruto, and you want to play with your friends, but this is a task you were chosen for. There is no one else more qualified to lead this village after my time is up. I know you can do it, Naruto, and I'm going to help you." The little blonde gave his grandfather a solemn look of determination and grinned. "Don't worry. I won't let you down. I'll do whatever you need me to do." Sarutobi smiled and stood back up. He had a rough time ahead of him. "That's good to hear, Naruto. Now tell me, what do you know about being a ninja?" Naruto's eyes lit up. "Ninjas are really cool. They can do all kinds of stuff, and they're really strong." "Ah. And who do you think is the strongest ninja in this village?" Naruto put his finger to his chin and thought for a moment. "I dunno. I really don't know." Sarutobi chuckled and patted the boy's head. "I'm the strongest ninja in this village, Naruto." Naruto stared up at Sarutobi, completely baffled. But you can't be the strongest. You're well, you know." Sarutobi held in his laughter, already knowing what was going to be said. "I'm what?" Naruto shrunk in on himself, trying to will himself smaller. You're old." "Yes, I'm old, but that doesn't make me any less strong. With age comes wisdom, and while I'm not as physically strong as I was when I was younger, I have years of experience and cunning to draw on. I'm strong because of my mind, not my body." "Gigi, can you teach me to be strong?" "Ha, I can. And we'll start today. I want you to put on this suit, and we'll get started." Naruto grunted as he shrugged on the bodysuit. "It's heavy, Gigi." "I know. That's a weighted bodysuit designed to improve your muscles. We'll work on your body during the day and your mind at night. Now hop to it, and give me 10 laps around the yard." As Naruto struggled around, adjusting to his new weight, Sarutobi was having a mildly heated discussion with Eri. "He's too young for this, father. He's only 4, he doesn't need to be learning everything you're going to teach him at this age. He needs to start now, Eri. The sooner I start, the sooner we can have a Hokage that can protect this village and put an end to all the petty squabbling of the council and people." "But he's so little. Look at him struggling. He's not ready." The old Hokage sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Eri, I love you like my daughter, but we've been through this several times since he turned 2. He needs to start now, while his mind is young and malleable." His face turned grim and Eri felt a little bit of fear. This was no longer her father-in-law, this was the professor. His life will not be an easy one. We've given him a home and love, yes, but outside these walls is an ugly, dirty, hate-filled world. I want him to be ready for that, especially when I turn the evidence of his birth over to the public. His mother and father had many enemies within the village as well as outside our walls. He has to be able to protect himself, and strike down those who would do him, or this village, harm. His gaze softened a bit, and his age began to show a little more. It wasn't supposed to be like this, you know? I'm not supposed to be Hokage, and he's not supposed to be an orphan. His father was supposed to be teaching him right now, in between running a village and dealing with the neighboring villages. He was supposed to learn about his family from his parents' mouths, not from a dusty scroll or a surrogate grandfather. But either way, he is destined for bigger things than you or I could imagine. And that starts today. He turned to see Naruto huffing and puffing on his last lap, and when the boy had finished, he called him over. Drop and give me 50 each of push-ups and sit-ups, then do 30 jumping jacks. After that, we'll begin the fun stuff. Remember to stretch out once you're finished. Naruto nodded his head tiredly and began his exercises. If this was part of his future job, he wasn't very enthusiastic so far. Sarutobi, meanwhile, had ducked back inside, leaving a Kage Bunshin to keep watch. He stood in front of Yahiko and Eri, outlining his plan. Now look. I know you two aren't very overjoyed with what I'm doing, but you'll have to get past that. I need your help as we mold him into a Hokage. Eri, your job is to make sure he eats more healthy things. You can spoil him every now and then, but his diet is going to have to make a drastic change. Yahiko, I want you to teach him to read. Instill a love of literature into him. I want the two of you to also ensure that he keeps up with his friends. Yahiko scowled and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. She was beginning to show her pregnancy, and he didn't want her working too hard. By instill, you mean force? I don't like this, Dad. It reminds me of the way the Uchiha raised Itachi. Sarutobi glared at his son and held his hands behind his back. The one shining difference between the way Itachi was raised and Naruto is being raised is that I don't see him as a stepping stone to further my own ambitions. This is the only thing he can do in life. Do you think any civilians would hire him to work for them? No, of course they wouldn't. So, he'll be a shinobi and I'm training him to be the best of the best. I'm not training him to be a normal ninja, I'm training him to be a Hokage. But what is the difference? Itachi was raised to be the ultimate Uchiha. The boy literally has no emotions. And Naruto does. I won't deprive him of his humanity, but I will not leave him to the wolves unprepared. Excuse me, my student is done with his exercises. Yahiko and Eri watched in silence as the older Sarutobi walked out. I still don't like this. It's wrong to decide a child's future for them. Yahiko sighed and pulled his wife in closer. He understood where his wife was coming from and he agreed, but Naruto's future was already chosen the day he was born. It is wrong. But the Yondaime sealed any of the boy's alternative paths by sealing the Kyuubi within him. This is the only path he can take, and Dad is just making sure he can walk it with his head held high. The only thing we can do is help and make sure he retains his humanity. Eri rubbed the small bulge on her tummy and reached up to kiss her husband on the lips. As long as he never loses that brilliant smile of his, I'll be happy. Sarutobi came out to a wide-eyed Naruto standing quietly in the yard. Gigi, how did you do that? You turned into smoke and disappeared. Excellent, an inquisitive young mind. That is part of what I shall teach you in the years to come. That was a Kagebunshin, a form of clone used for information gathering and fighting. It will be an important tool for learning later. Right now, you need the basics. We're going to learn how to mold chakra. What's chakra? Sarutobi smiled and put himself into professor mode. He loved to impart wisdom to the younger generation. Chakra is made by meshing together spiritual and physical energy. You just have to unlock it so we can begin to mold it into something else. How? Concentrate on a force inside you. A stream that seems to flow through you and try to guide that stream somewhere outside its natural flow. That should unlock it. He watched as Naruto sat down and began to concentrate. Sarutobi was practically giddy with excitement. Here he was, with another student, about to begin the lessons that would last a lifetime. He watched hopefully as Naruto's face scrunched in concentration and struggle. Slowly, but surely, the chakra began to trickle out. Sarutobi was happy for his student and was about to tell him to stop when he felt the flow of chakra increase and his eyes widened. Naruto, you can stop now. The boy apparently was in too much of a trance to hear him. His face was still screwed into that look of utter concentration. Sarutobi began to sweat when the blue chakra started to be easily seen. It shouldn't be possible for a child to produce that much. Naruto! Stop now! Naruto still didn't hear him, and the chakra flow was so powerful now that it attracted the entirety of the Sarutobi household. Yahiko and Eri stood in wonder as the boy was bathed in the ethereal blue glow. Eri, who was a civilian, could even see it. Father, is he supposed to do that? No, he's not. Naruto, stop this at once. The small blonde was now shaking from the force of chakra being expelled, and Sarutobi did the only thing he could think of to stop it. He chopped Naruto on the back of the neck and watched with bated breath as the blue chakra receded. Well, at least he unlocked it. But what awesome power! Sarutobi turned to his family and servants and put on his most intimidating face. Whatever you just saw here never leaves here, understood? Aoi, despite the fact he might get in trouble, decided to ask the unspoken question. Master, is it normal for a child to have such power? Sarutobi frowned and looked back to the conked-out child. No, it isn't. But then again, we all know he isn't normal by any conventional means. With chakra that powerful, and at such a young age, it'll probably take quite a while to train him to use it effectively. I hope not, but that is usually the case with those with power. Yahiko picked his son up off the ground and started back toward the house. I think that's enough physical training for today, Dad. I'll start him on some history and theory tonight. Sarutobi smiled and cracked his aching back. Yes, that might be an ideal thing for today. I have a few things to tend to at the tower. Tell Naruto we'll start again tomorrow. Naruto had not been happy with his schedule of learning. He remembered letting his chakra go, and it flaring wildly out of control as he tried to rein it in. He remembered getting chopped in the neck, and he remembered getting fussed at by his mother once he awoke. He remembered reading about the history of Konoha and starting on a book of jutsu theory with his father, which he found utterly boring. His father had bopped him over the head with a book and told him that he needed to know this. When asked why, a contemplative look came over his face. Because knowledge is power, Naruto. Let's say you're fighting someone. You know what your opponent is capable of. He knows what you're capable of. But neither of you have any updated information on each other for the past 6 months. If he tries a move you've never met before, what will you do? Get away. Wrong. That's what normal people do. It might be a jutsu that spreads out as it goes, covering more area, but losing power. It might be a straightforward shot. You need to be able to analyze these things and choose your path accordingly. Then why am I reading this? Why can't I just train? This is training, son. You're training your mind to know what to do. The body can't react if the mind doesn't know what it's doing. Naruto nodded slowly, letting the information seep in. So if I read everything I can, I'll get really smart and be able to figure things out more quickly? In a nutshell, yes. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. Naruto silently picked up his book on history and started to read again. Yahiko had never been more proud of his son, but soon, he had to help him again. Hey Dad, what's a kawarimi? And so had began their nightly sessions. Currently, Naruto was lying in bed asleep. Not that he knew it, but his alarm clock said 4 o'clock and a sinister figure stood beside his bed. The figure lifted its hand, with possibly a weapon, and began to tilt it downward. And Naruto was introduced to the concept of a cold glass of water in the morning if he didn't wake up when he was supposed to. Sarutobi watched amused as his grandson spit and sputtered and thrashed around on the bed. Once he was finished, Sarutobi cleared his throat and threw the training suit at him. Get dressed and meet me downstairs. We're going on a run. Naruto grumbled as he made his way downstairs, the suit seeming to be heavier than it was yesterday. He looked around for his grandfather and found him outside, standing with his hands on his hips, twisting and bending in several directions. Naruto walked outside to find the old man in a black ninja outfit, totally contrasting his usual white robes. Ah, good morning. Awake now, are we? Naruto mumbled under his breath and nodded. Good. Now we're going to run 1 lap around the village. Every 2 weeks we'll increase it by 1 lap, keeping with the same time limit. But Gigi, I can't run that fast. You don't have to run fast, you just have to complete the task. We'll worry about speed later. Right now, I want to condition your body so that you can complete whatever I give you to do. Now let's go. But Gigi. Sarutobi turned a stern eye to his grandson and Naruto cringed under the glare. During these times, I am your sensei Naruto and I expect you to show me the proper respect. You may not like me sometimes during our training, but you will respect me. I may love you like a grandson, but that does not mean I will tolerate insubordination from you. Naruto's eyes widened. What do you mean like a grandson? Sarutobi cursed under his breath. That had been an unwanted slip of the tongue. He put on a smile and patted the boy's head, diffusing the situation. It was a slip of the tongue, Naruto. Now let's go. The boy nodded his head and they jogged off into the morning. Naruto lay on his back panting. His run had turned into quite a spectacle when they'd run afoul of a certain green-clad jounin. Naruto had been fascinated with the man's eyebrows, but had remained quiet as Sarutobi and Guy spoke while running. Guy had been impressed that a 4-year-old was out on a run with the Hokage and had voiced his pleasure at having found one with great flames of youth. He had offered to help train Naruto whenever he could in taijutsu and Sarutobi readily accepted. He couldn't be around all the time. Naruto was happy when their run ended. He might be an endless bundle of energy, but he was still a child and his muscles were not yet developed fully. Before he could enjoy the respite, Sarutobi called him over to begin his morning calisthenics. By the time they got around to jutsus, Naruto was nearly on empty until Sarutobi told him they were going to be manipulating his chakra. Naruto had studied the previous night with his father on some of the things that one could do with chakra, and right now he was like a kid with a new toy, which he essentially was. Sarutobi was quick to remind him of the seriousness of their training with a bop on the head. We're here to train your body, Naruto, not waste energy. If you have time and energy to jump around, then you have time to put more effort into learning. I'm sorry, sensei. I'm just excited about some of the things I read I could do with chakra last night. Sarutobi smiled and put his hands behind his back. That's all well and good, Naruto, but I need to get you to the point where you can actually mold the chakra into a jutsu. You're still young and therefore your control won't be all that great, but that's where this comes in. He held up a leaf and Naruto's face scrunched in confusion. That's a leaf, sensei. What does that have to do with anything? I want you to be able to hold this leaf to your forehead, using only chakra, before I'll teach you any kind of jutsu. Once you've mastered this exercise, we'll add more leaves to different parts of your body and let you climb trees. How long will this take? The old Hokage shrugged and grinned at his student. That all depends on your skill, determination, and mindset. If you set out to do something, do it. Don't half-ass it. Don't skip out on this training either. I won't teach you anything until you learn it. Now try to imagine your chakra as a suction cup to keep the leaf to your forehead. I have some things to take care of at the tower, but I'll be back soon to see how you're progressing. Naruto nodded and picked up the leaf, settling into a cross-legged stance against a tree. Sarutobi watched with pride as he put the leaf on his forehead, only to huff in agitation as it blew away. He turned in the doorway to find his son staring at him. Well? How's he coming along? He's impatient and brash, but then again, he's 4. I've never taught a student that young. He has promised, though. He kept up with both me and Guy on our morning run with us at a quarter speed. Yahiko's eyes widened and he smiled. That's my boy. He'll do just fine. I'm going to make him start on the next chapter of Jutsu Theory tonight. That's good. I think we should designate a day or two where he can go and play with his friends, though, especially Hinata. He brightens her and the rest of the Hyuga's day when he visits. That family needs a good dose of cheer. I agree. I'll arrange a play date later. Hinata will be ecstatic to see him. Indeed. Well, I must be off. Someone has to kill the paperwork after all. Keep an eye on Naruto for me. Make sure he's doing that exercise right. Yahiko nodded and went back inside the house. He found Eri sitting in a chair, lightly rubbing the small bulge in her stomach. Are you still fretting over the baby? Don't worry about it. How can I not worry about it? Naruto is still a handful, and to have another child running around. Yahiko sighed as he sat on the arm of the chair and kissed her on the forehead. You have to remember that not all children are like Naruto. This one will be a cakewalk compared to him when he was a baby. It won't eat as much, hopefully. Sarutobi sighed as he walked back through the gates of his home. He had taken longer than he thought and had missed the rest of Naruto's training. He regretted that, but knew the boy would understand. He was thoroughly surprised to find that Naruto didn't greet him at the door. He searched for a while before finding the boy reading the Jutsu Theory book with Yahiko, a leaf stuck to his forehead. He smiled proudly. Things would go more smoothly from here. Naruto panted as he rose from the ground. He'd been thrown there quite harshly by his sensei and it had hurt a lot. This particular taijutsu style was hard to learn and required concentration from him on several levels. Sarutobi insisted on teaching him Shaolin monkey style since it was a fast-paced, acrobatic style that promoted counters and quick strikes. He grunted as he stood upright and settled into the crouching stance again. Good. That was very good, but you need to be more flexible and not rush headlong into things. Again. Naruto grimaced and analyzed what he saw before him. After almost a month, he was making considerable progress. He had the leaf exercise down to a fine art, and constantly had a leaf affixed to his forehead, even as he sparred. The only time it fell was when he was unconscious. He'd begun to work leaves onto other parts of his body while he read with his father. His chakra control was excellent considering he started with nothing. He rushed forward, low to the ground, and swept at his sensei's legs. Sarutobi picked his left leg up and sent it crashing back toward the ground. Naruto used the momentum he'd built up on the sweep to jerk himself into a handstand and lash out with a kick aimed at his mentor's chest. Sarutobi grabbed his foot and flung him toward a tree. Naruto caught himself at the last second by latching onto a branch and swinging up and over it, only to stop in a squatting position. Sarutobi wiped his brow and watched his student with interest. Naruto had come quite a ways in just a month. For a 4-year-old he was quite the astute learner, and grasped things easily if given an example. Written word was even easier for him, as he could conceptualize what he had to do and figured it out for himself, usually bending it to accommodate certain aspects he found either uncomfortable or impossible. That's enough for today, Naruto. It's almost time for you to go visit Hinata anyway. I have to go to the tower and fight a losing battle against paperwork. Be sure to get home in time for your evening lessons. Naruto swung down from the branch and landed in a crouch. He stood upright and bowed toward his grandfather. Of course, sensei. I'll do as you say. Sarutobi smiled and waved him away. That signaled the end of their student-teacher role for the day, and both were glad for it. Good. Now go have fun with Hinata and don't get into too much trouble. Alright, Gigi. See you later. Sarutobi grinned as the blonde made his way inside to take a bath before going to the Hyuga household. He and Eri had begun to beat manners into the boy's head along with his training, and he was pleasantly surprised to see that Naruto was well behaved when he wanted to be. The boy was a natural-born actor. If he didn't want to be seen as a child, he could imitate his grandfather to a T. Just like his birth father. Sarutobi shook the thought from his mind and went inside to change into his Hokage robes. He hated having to cut the boy's training short, especially since his stamina increased by the day. Perhaps it was time to have Guy intervene. Taijutsu was Guy's specialty, and he could always keep Naruto's genjutsu and ninjutsu to himself. They'd have to find the boy a weapon soon too. He himself was more situated to bojutsu, and perhaps he'd introduce him to Enma. See what the old monkey thought about a possible new summoner. But that was all for later. Right now he had to prepare himself to stamp his name over and over and over and over. Naruto hummed happily as his mother escorted him to the Hyuga household. He loved to visit Hinata, she always made him feel wanted. It was the walk over that unnerved him. Whereas the clans welcomed him with open arms, the civilians sneered and made rude gestures toward him. Eri scowled at those who did so, and they quickly turned away. She hated that they treated her son like this. They still held the Sarutobis in high regard, but Naruto was treated as a pariah, and one day they'd have to explain why. She dreaded that day. Naruto just thought that they didn't like him because he was treated well. Perhaps they didn't like that he was being trained by the Hokage. Maybe they thought it was favoritism above their own children. He just couldn't figure it out. He'd asked one of them before what he did to make them angry, and the woman had gave him a look that, had daggers come out of her eyes, would have killed him. You know what you did. And they treat you like a king for it. He didn't know what she meant by that. He'd asked his grandfather what she meant, and the old man's face drooped, and he clapped a hand on Naruto's shoulder. One day soon, I'll tell you the story. But until then, trust in me that all will be well. And he did. He did trust his grandfather, but the looks were becoming more and more baleful and hateful, searing into his memory. He was always happy when they arrived at one of his friends' houses. He couldn't wait to see Hinata again. Hinata was in her own little world. Her mother was pregnant with her what she hoped was a little sister, and she was currently rubbing her tummy, trying to get the baby to kick. Her mother chuckled and pushed her tiny hand away. Hinata, the baby won't kick if you poke at it. Besides, it hasn't grown enough to do that yet. But I wanted to play with my baby sister. And how do you know it's a little girl? Because you can choose the baby you want. Right? Himiko's laughter rang out through the room, sounding like 100 merry bells. She truly loved her innocent little daughter. That's not entirely the way it works, Hinata. Suddenly they heard the sound of pounding feet, and the door slid open to reveal a burst of sun-dropped hair. Hinata-chan! She barely had time to turn around before she was tackled by her best friend. Eri sighed from the doorway and picked him off the poor dazed little girl by the scruff of his neck. What have I told you about attacking Hinata like that? Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and looked down. Sorry, it's just I haven't seen her in over a week. I was just excited. It's okay, Eri-san, he didn't hurt me. Hinata's soft voice came from the floor as she picked herself up. Naruto turned to her and flashed a megawatt grin. Wanna go annoy Niji? He's such a stick in the mud nowadays. I don't think we should bother him, Naruto-kun. He's not nice to be around now. Naruto sighed in defeat and immediately put his smile back on. Wanna go see what Kiba's doing? Hinata turned to her mother and found her smiling. Go on, you two, have fun. Just take a guard with you. Naruto grabbed Hinata's hand and ran out of the room, dragging the helpless little girl behind him, while shouting thank you over his shoulder. Eri sighed heavily and took the cup of tea offered her from Himiko. Thank you? He is such a handful sometimes. Yes, but he brightens Hinata's day so much. Hayashi's too, even though he won't admit it. She needs to be around people like him. Our clan is too rigid and stoic. Niji isn't a good influence on her either. Has he gotten any better? Himiko sighed and rubbed her stomach absently. No, he hasn't. He's become even more withdrawn, and sometimes I see him staring at Hinata with disdain. I just hope he doesn't become bitter toward her. Eri nodded and took another sip of tea. So do I, because Naruto wouldn't stand for it. He's quite protective of her. Yes, he's like the big brother that Niji should be. If only our clan did things differently. The unspoken words hung in the air. Then everything would be better. Naruto raced through the streets of Konoha, a puffing Hyuga behind him, carrying Hinata. The poor little girl just couldn't keep up with her more energetic friend. He stopped outside the gates of the Inuzuka compound and turned around to see a scowling, red-faced, branch house Hyuga. Naruto-sama, I would like to request once again that you don't run off and leave Hinata-sama like that. It's very rude. Naruto grinned sheepishly and bowed. I'm sorry, Hyuga-san. I'll try to be more careful next time. The Hyuga mumbled something under his breath that sounded like I'll bet and sat the Hyuga heiress down. Hinata tottered for a moment and then stood upright. She huffed indignantly and walked up to Naruto. She might be shy around people she didn't know and was quiet and gentle by nature, but Naruto's influence rubbed off on her after prolonged exposure. You left me again. I'm sorry. Hinata sighed and bowed her head. She just couldn't stay angry with him for more than 2 seconds. He was too kind-hearted and apologetic. Just don't do it again, please. Naruto stood upright and grabbed her hand. Okay. Let's find Kiba. The two children walked through the grounds with their escort quietly, searching for their missing friend. Several dogs walked up to them, but when they smelled who it was they simply wagged their tails and left. Naruto was on good terms with most of the dogs in the kennel. And what have we here? The gruff voice came from behind them and Naruto immediately recognized it as the voice of one Kuramaru, the only dog that was indifferent to him at best. The dog seemed to keep shut of him if it could, but today he had come forward. Naruto squeezed Hinata's hand and she squeezed back for reassurance. She smiled slightly since it was very rare for her to reassure him. Kuramaru made his way in front of them and sat on his haunches. What are you two doing here? What is your business? Naruto put on his best possible impassive face he was learning from his grandfather and spoke softly. We're looking for Kiba. Have you seen him? He's busy. Go home. Well, if we could just talk to him for a second. Leave. Hinata saw that the dog's eyes were hardening slowly and that Naruto wasn't having any luck. Time to call in her trump card, her inability for anyone to truly hate her. Kuramaru-san, if we could just speak to him for a second. The one-eyed dog turned its gaze to her, and she shivered. The thing was more like a wolf than a dog. I said he's. Kuramaru, what are you doing? Hello, Naruto, Hinata. The two bowed as one and spoke together. Hello, Tsum-sama. Tsum eyeballed the two and her companion. She'd overheard everything, but wasn't about to give it away. She wanted answers for her companion's abruptness. How can I help you two youngsters today? Can Kiba play today? Some smiled at them and pointed in the direction of the kennel. He can now. He's being punished for messing up one of his sister's things, but I'll let him go for now. He can finish cleaning out the pens later. Some smiled as the two ran off to the kennels and turned to Kuramaru with a hard eye. What was that all about? The dog had the decency to look ashamed. Forgive me, Sim, but I can't help myself sometimes. He reeks of fox all the time. Sim sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose. You know he's not the fox, Kuramaru. Don't be that way toward him. One day he'll be strong enough to call you on your behavior, and where will you be then? Where will those ignorant villagers be then? She left the dog to ponder that as she went back inside. Naruto and Hinata tried to sneak up on their friend, but, as always, he smelled them coming. You two really shouldn't try to sneak up on me. I'll always smell you. Hinata giggled as she watched Naruto sulk. He really was too funny when he was around Kiba. One day, I'll find a way to mask my scent, and then you'll be sorry. Kiba turned around and grinned at his friends. I doubt it. You smell like a fox. It's pretty hard not to find you. Naruto put a finger to his chin and thought. I wonder why I smell like a fox. Mom got me a stuffed fox for a present one time and I sleep with it. I don't think that's why you smell like a fox, Naruto-kun. Kiba grinned at Hinata and threw an arm around her neck. No one can explain why he smells like that. I asked Mom about it, and she just told me that people smelled differently. He took an experimental whiff of Hinata and she blushed. You smell like flowers and cinnamon rolls. Hinata pushed him away and hid behind Naruto. I do not smell. Naruto frowned at Kiba and turned away. We were gonna ask you to play and help you get out of trouble, but since you hurt Hinata's feelings. Kiba immediately went on the defensive. But Hinata, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Please forgive me. You smell really nice. Hinata smiled and turned around. Being around Naruto also gave her the courage to be playful. But you were being a meanie. The Hyuga watching sighed and looked up at the sky. It should be another 15 minutes before they left for the park. The kids always did this. When the three arrived at the park, they found the other children there as well. Shikamaru and Chuji were lounging on the grass, watching the clouds and sharing a bag of chips. Shino was watching a mound of ants intently, and Ino was playing with a pink-haired girl. Shikamaru and Chuji waved at the three and Kiba bounded over to them. Hinata turned loose of Naruto's hand and padded over to say hello to Shino. Naruto watched them go, and turned his attention to Ino and the girl she was playing with. He watched with careful eyes as the civilian parents gathered up their children and began to leave, but shook it off. He strode towards Ino, flashing a brilliant grin. Hey Ino-chan. What ya doing? Ino smiled up at her friend and turned back to Sakura. I'm playing with Sakura. I met her a while ago and we're friends now. Sakura, this is Uzumaki Naruto. My mommy said he's a bad person. Ino frowned at her new friend and looked back at Naruto. Well, I don't think he's bad. He's a little loud, but he's not mean. Sakura glanced over to where her mother was sitting and noticed the subtle motion for her to come. She stood and said goodbye to Ino before running off. Ino turned to Naruto and frowned at him. Now what did you do to her, Naruto? His eyes widened and he put up his hands in defense. I didn't do anything, Ino-chan. I just met her today. I don't know her. Ino glared at him and stood up, huffing. She walked away toward her mother. I bet you did something mean, Naruto. You ran off one of my new friends and I'm not talking to you. Naruto watched her go with tears in his eyes. He didn't like it when people were mad at him for no reason. He lowered his head and sniffled, trying to keep the tears from falling. But I didn't do anything. Hinata watched Ino leave and comforted Naruto by sitting on the swings with him until they left to take Kiba back home. Her day with Naruto was ruined and she felt bad that Ino had been mean to him. Kiba didn't know what to do once they dropped him off, so he just mumbled a goodbye and walked inside. The Hyuga knew that he had to take Naruto home now, and as they walked, he reflected on what he had seen. It happened every time the boy tried to make new friends, and now it appeared that he had lost one. Being every bit as sheltered as Hinata, Naruto had very few chances to interact with children his age, and he treasured the friends he had. Losing Ino would be a big blow. Hinata stood silently with her head bowed as they stood before the gates of the Sarutobi compound. Naruto looked up to see his best friend's downtrodden gaze and silently berated himself for bringing her day down. He put on a big grin and gave her a hug. It's not your fault, Hinata-chan. I know what you're thinking. Don't be like that. Ino-chan is just being a demihead. I'll see you next time, okay? Hinata gazed up into his eyes and gave him a small smile. She was glad he was strong for both of them. His strength was beginning to rub off on her. I'm sorry about Ino-chan, Naruto-kun. She shouldn't have said such mean things. It's okay. I'm fine. Don't be sad, Hinata-chan. Smile for me. She gave him a big smile and he grinned as he gave her another hug. With a wave he was gone inside the compound and she and the Hyuga guard began the trek home. Hinata gave another glance back and smiled. Naruto-kun will be fine. The Hyuga guard smiled when he saw her perk up and walk a little straighter. He chuckled in his mind. Kids. Naruto frowned as he walked inside the house. Those words from Ino still hurt, and he still didn't know what he had done. He nearly ran into his father as he rounded a corner. Hello, son. How was your day? Bad. Why bad? Naruto looked up at his father with the beginnings of tears in his eyes and Yahiko mentally sighed. What happened now? I don't think Ino-chan likes me anymore. Yahiko scooped his son up and walked toward the study that they used for their nightly lessons. Eri was sitting in an armchair with her feet up, sipping a glass of mint tea. She liked to listen to them as they studied. Plus, she learned things too. Her gaze hardened when she saw Nero's semi-wet cheeks and she raised an eyebrow at Yahiko. Tell your mother what you told me, son. Naruto sniffled and buried his face in his mother's dress. She rubbed the top of his head affectionately and spoke to him softly. Well, sweetie? What's wrong? I don't think Ino-chan likes me anymore. We went to the park and she was talking to a girl named Sakura and she said I was a bad boy and now Ino-chan says I'm mean and ran her friend off. Eri let the information sink in and sighed. Apparently this Sakura girl was from a civilian family, since the only children Naruto had regular contact with were clan children. The only clan children he didn't play with were the Uchihas, and she was happy for that. Sasuke was a pleasant child when you first met him, but he idolized his cold, emotionless brother and was sure to turn out like him. Not a choice playmate for either of her children, born or unborn. Honey, Ino-chan is just a little girl and she doesn't know what she's talking about. This Sakura girl doesn't know you and she doesn't know what she's saying either. Everything will be fine. Naruto sniffled and nodded his head, turning to face his father when he heard a book hit the table. Yahiko grinned and patted the chair beside him. Come on, boy, we're studying the theory behind henge tonight. And you'll be keeping leaves on your forehead and elbows as we read. Naruto groaned as he sat in the chair. He loved spending time reading, but theory was so boring. He'd much rather learn the jutsu than read about it. But he promised his grandfather he'd learn from him and resigned himself to that fate. He just didn't break promises if he could help it. He started on the page assigned him. Henge is the ability to change the appearance of a person into something else entirely. The size and shape can be anything, but there are several theories that weight can also be distributed or even negated. What's distributed? That means it can be put elsewhere to even it out. Oh, okay. What's negated? That means it's cancelled out. Oh, what's? That means it's not there. Oh, okay. Eri giggled into her teacup and Yahiko glared at her. It was his responsibility to teach the boy, not hers. He wanted him taught right. He grinned mischievously and paid attention to Naruto. Hey Dad, what size manipulation? Yahiko smirked and cut his eyes to Eri. Something pregnant women wish they had control over. A growl was his answer. What was that, dear? So totally worth it. The next day found Naruto out on his run with Sarutobi again, but this time the green spandex ninja was nowhere in sight. He sighed in contentment, until Sarutobi cleared his throat, a sign he was about to talk. Yes, sensei? Naruto, from here on out, Guy will be your taijutsu instructor. I'll teach you jutsus when you master the next level of chakra manipulation, but I have to start attending to other duties as Hokage. But sensei. No buts, Naruto. I don't like it any more than you do, but Guy is an excellent teacher and you'll go far under his wing. He'll have you breaking bones in no time. I hope he means other people's bones. As they came back to the house, Sarutobi took on a serious demeanor when he saw Guy doing vertical push-ups, his loud boisterous voice carrying the number he was on over the grounds. The old Hokage knelt beside Naruto and looked him dead in the eye, as serious as could be. Naruto, I'm deadly serious here. Guy is a wonderful teacher, but if I ever catch you wearing a spandex bodysuit, I'll disown you. Am I clear? Naruto gulped and nodded. He didn't know what disown meant, but he didn't like the sound of it. He'd ask his father what it meant later. Sarutobi smiled and patted him on the head. Good boy. Now I'll be helping you with some advanced chakra manipulation soon, but for now, listen to Guy. He'll help you when he's not on missions. When he is, he'll give you a detailed guideline to follow, and I expect you to treat him with the utmost respect. To you, he is Guy-sensei, understood? Hi, sensei. Excellent. Good morning, Guy. Guy leapt to his feet, and the morning sun pinged off his pearly whites. Hokage-sama. A most splendid morning it is. And how is my new pupil on this most youthful of mornings? Naruto never got to answer, since they heard a window slide open and a coffee mug came hurtling out. Guy never saw it coming. It collided with his head and he hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. Eri leaned out the window looking bleary-eyed, and both Naruto and Sarutobi cringed at her voice's volume. The woman, while a civilian, had aim that would make Mitarashi Anko jealous. Mato Guy. There are people trying to sleep. Keep your damn voice down. The window slammed shut and Guy leapt to his feet as if nothing ever happened. His voice was considerably lower though. Ah, I forgot Eri-san was sleeping. Pregnant women need all the sleep they can get, you see, Naruto-kun. It helps the babies grow up strong and healthy. I've also heard, however, that walking in the morning before sunup can help them as well. Perhaps we should invite your mother to join us on one of our runs. Why-oh. Before he could get going, Sarutobi clapped a hand over his mouth and put a finger to his lips. Now, Guy, I know how excited you are to have a new student, but you must be quiet here. Eri needs her sleep, so keep it under 100 decibels, all right? The eccentric Jounin nodded and Sarutobi sighed before standing back and addressing the newest master and student. Well, I'll leave you two to it. Naruto, make me proud. Guy, keep it down or your flames of youth will suffer. YOSH. I shall. And if I can't? A swift side kick from Naruto to his shin quieted him, and Guy looked apologetically sheepish. Sarutobi smiled as he shunshined to his office. Those two will work out fine. Guy turned to his student with a twinkle in his eyes. He hadn't had a pupil in quite a while and wanted to enjoy the experience, at least until he took a team. Tell me, Naruto-kun, have you ever enjoyed the wonders of spandex? Naruto just sweat dropped. This was going to be a long day. Eri sipped her morning coffee as she sat on the porch watching her son and Guy spar. She had to admit, the man knew his stuff. Once he entered into his teacher mode, he was serious to a point of being scary. His eye was overly critical, and he tore the boy's taijutsu apart. No, Naruto-kun. Extend the leg just a bit more to distribute the weight. Cock your elbow more. Don't bend that knee. Let the body flow. You're too stiff. She giggled when she saw the sour look on Naruto's face. He was trying hard, but even Sarutobi was not this hard a taskmaster when it came to the martial arts. Guy thought nothing of shoving the boy's body this way or that to straighten him up, but even she could see his expertise shining through. Already, Naruto's body was remembering the stances and katas. Suddenly Guy appeared beside her. She blinked and looked back out to the yard. Of course. Kage-bunshin. Eri-san, I hope I did not disturb you on this most youthful morning earlier. I was merely excited about my new pupil. Eri smiled up warmly at him and shook her head. No, I'm sorry, Guy. I'm a little more cranky than normal in the mornings nowadays. I hope Father forgives me for breaking his favorite coffee cup on your head. Guy's laughter rang out over the grounds and she cringed. He was a nice man, but she was getting to her limit. Not that I mind talking to you, sensei, but why are you over here? Guy quit laughing and his face dropped to impassiveness. I just want you to know that I am utterly overjoyed that I can help teach your son, but I have to know how is it that he is still standing after his workout this morning? Eri cocked her head and looked at him quizzically. Whatever do you mean? Eri-san, he is just a 4-year-old boy. I know he is a ninja in training, but even so, his muscles have begun to develop faster than any other child's and his mind is further cultivated. He is developing faster than other 4-year-olds and that worries me. I know. It worries me too. But Father insists that he needs this. You know of his burden, Guy, you know of what it entails. The villagers shun and hate him, and he doesn't know why. We haven't told him yet. We think that his tenant is helping develop his body, while we cultivate his mind. Did you know he had fully developed, sharp canines at the age of 6 months? I did not know that. But it doesn't matter. The boy's stamina is otherworldly. No other student has kept up with my regimen as well as he has. I can only hope that my next genin team has half of his youthful vigor. Excuse me, I have to go. With a poof, the guy beside her disappeared and the guy in the yard stiffened for a moment and nodded in her direction before going back to the task of correcting what Naruto was doing wrong. Naruto stood with his hands on his knees, after a grueling lesson on Goken-style taijutsu. He liked it better than the monkey style. It was more rigid and allowed for more advancement than waiting, but Gai-sensei hit hard. And he was much more critical than his grandfather. The man was critical of how he stood, or held his hands, or looked at him sideways than Sarutobi could ever be. But that was why Gai was a taijutsu master and Sarutobi was the professor. Sarutobi had forgotten more than they'd ever learn. Gai had beaten the memories into his body so he wouldn't have to remember. Alright Naruto, let's call it a day. You've done very well on this youthful morning. Now come over here and we'll outline your training schedule. Naruto beamed at the praise and immediately bounded over to his sensei. He didn't notice Gai's wide eyes as he flopped down cross-legged before the man. His stamina, it's like he never did anything today. I'm very impressed, Naruto. You learn quickly and you don't object too much to what your sensei tells you. That is most admirable in a student. But that attitude should only apply to learning jutsus and the martial arts. Never let your true self be swayed by someone else's ideals. What do you mean, sensei? Don't let anyone tell you something that you don't believe in. Don't allow others to mold your mind for their benefit. You'll find in this world there are those who will hate you for no reason other than you're alive. You must be able to rise above them and be the bigger man. Let your senseis mold your body. Use your mind to decide what is right and what is wrong. Naruto nodded slowly. He didn't understand everything that his sensei was telling him, but his father could explain it in detail. Naruto stood and bowed to Gai. Thank you for your help, sensei. Gai smiled and handed Naruto a tiny scroll. He flipped it open to reveal his training schedule. Of course we'll have to get some better weights for that suit you're wearing, but that can come later. Our lives will be very busy from here on out, Naruto-kun, but you and I are going to face this together. I've never trained a future Hokage before, so this is quite an honor. Naruto looked toward the ground and his hair overshadowed his eyes. Gai-sensei, what do you think of me taking the title Hokage? I've read about what it is, but I don't know if I'm the best one for the job. I mean, I'm not strong or smart. Gai knelt down and put his large hands on the boy's small shoulders. He looked him right in the eye and smiled. You're not strong right now, Naruto, but you will be. And you are very bright for your age. You'll make a splendid Hokage one day, and I'll be happy to serve under you. My only request when you reach the office is that you never let your flames of youth die. Naruto smiled at his teacher, and Gai was pleasantly surprised to see the sun gleam off his fangs. Don't worry, sensei. My flames of youth will never die. YOSH. And if they ever do, I will carry a boulder between my toes from here to Suna, until your flames return. Gai. Ah yes, sorry Eri-san. Well, I must be going, Naruto. Continue your studies in the evenings and make your mind as strong as your body. And don't forget about your friends. Even a Hokage needs friends. It is lonely at the top. Naruto watched as Gai shined away and snatched up one of the leaves from the small whirlwind. I have to learn how to do that one day. Sarutobi sighed happily as he entered his house and hung his robes and hat on the hook by the door. It was always pleasantly quiet now that Naruto had begun his studies and he had time for a decent smoke. He'd watched the new student and teacher through his crystal ball and was surprised to see that Naruto was coming along quickly in Goken, a greater surprise that he wasn't affronted by Gai's personal style or speeches. He'd chosen wisely for taijutsu, but nin and genjutsu were up to him. As he walked by the window, he noticed that Naruto had a leaf on his forehead and one on each elbow and kneecap. Sarutobi smiled and stopped by the window looking in. While the leaf exercise was not an overly difficult one, especially compared to tree climbing or water walking, it was essential for the young ones to know. He'd begin the boy on tree climbing in another month or so. Naruto saw his grandfather at the window and waved to him. Yahiko looked up and gave his father a broad smile. That is, until Naruto asked him another question. Hey Dad, what's disown mean? Why, who told you that word? Gigi said he'd disown me if he caught me wearing spandex. Yahiko growled and looked toward the window where the old man had miraculously disappeared. He turned to his son and smiled. Remember some of those words I said I'd tell you about when you're older? Yeah? Add this to that list. Now you keep reading. I'm going to go find your grandfather and have a talk with him. Naruto nodded and turned back to his book. This Kage Bunshin sounded pretty cool. He wondered why it didn't have any more information on it though. It was now into Naruto's 5th year, and he had grown much. He was a bright and sunny child, always in the middle of things when he wasn't training with his senseis. Sarutobi had taught him Henge and Kawarimi, and he was using them effectively to mimic passerby and swap with random items. Sarutobi insisted he be grounded in the basics before he was taught the more advanced things. And because he was starting so early, there was more than enough time. Guy had given up on the weights after a month. Sarutobi had been puzzled when the green-clad man presented him with Naruto's bodysuit and said it wasn't working. Hokage-sama, I can't train Naruto with weights anymore. They simply aren't helping. Sarutobi gave Guy a hard look and took a drag on his pipe. Explain. Guy nodded his head and sat the folded bodysuit on the desk. His body is adapting to the weights, Hokage-sama. His body is doing things that normal bodies just don't do, and the weights are not helping, they are hindering his progress. Sarutobi frowned and shook his head. I don't understand what you're telling me, Guy. Hokage-sama, as I'm sure you're aware, the human body's muscles break down and rebuild when they are stressed with weights and weight training. The same is said for gravity seals since stress is being put on the body. Yes. Naruto's body is not breaking down, Hokage-sama, it is adapting, adjusting to the weight. His muscles don't break down and reform, they merely adjust so the weight isn't a burden and he doesn't notice them anymore. His body moves as if they weren't there. Sarutobi drew on his pipe and closed his eyes. I suppose you've experimented with this? Of course, Hokage-sama. I raised the weights by 5 pounds each day, and by noon, he had adjusted so that they didn't bother him. He never fatigued, he just adjusted. That's the best word I can come up with. He adapted. I'll allow you to take the weights away and we'll see what happens from there. These developments are somewhat troubling and yet they are most fortuitous. My grandson will be a very powerful warrior when he grows up. Guy smiled and bowed. And I couldn't be prouder to know I have a hand in that. Currently Naruto was working on the Bunshin, but he just couldn't get it right. He had expressed his doubts to Sarutobi about his ability to perform the jutsu and had been told to keep at it until he got it. But 5 months and no better results? That was pushing it. Naruto grit his teeth and tried again. His control was what Sarutobi called adequate, and he knew he should be able to do it, but it was like he had a mental block. Most of his friends were practicing in the basics of their family's jutsus, but Naruto's family, having no specific jutsus or kekai genkai, was stuck with working from the ground up. He liked henge and used it often. But his version was a little different. Naruto had finally gotten the henge down to a more than acceptable level, and could change into anyone or anything he imagined. Sarutobi noticed that the boy was quite skilled with it, and not only changed his shape but weight as well. In fact, he completely baffled his senseis. Sarutobi had called Guy in to be his witness to the wonder that Naruto had created, and they both watched as he performed his henge into Guy. Guy nodded his head in approval. Same height, same build, same facial features. He was about to ask what the problem was when Sarutobi changed into Guy and beckoned him over. Tell me, Guy, what are the basics of henge taught in the academy? Well, the basics are that it allows you to transform into anything or anyone within reason. The body cannot be that much bigger than yours and the weight cannot be changed, but it is basically an illusion that is easily broken. Very good. Now, if one were to pump more chakra than necessary into the jutsu, what would happen? I don't know. Touch my shoulder. Guy touched Sarutobi's shoulder and saw the illusion waver slightly, as most illusions are wont to do when disturbed. Sarutobi released the technique and pointed at their young charge. Now touch Naruto's shoulder. Guy walked over and poked Naruto in the shoulder, and his eyes widened when he realized that the illusion did not waver in the slightest. In fact, the illusion felt solid? That wasn't right. Henge was a low-level technique that required great mental effort to keep up constantly, and it wasn't a solid technique. True, the older you get the better with the technique, and there were even variations used that multiplied kunai and shuriken by hardening chakra to resemble the objects, but that's all they were chakra. This shouldn't be possible on a child's level. Naruto whipped his head back and forth, trying to decipher what made the two so odd. Sarutobi merely smiled at the boy and patted him on the head. Don't worry about it. We'll tell you what I wanted to show Guy later. Of course, later, more often than not, never came and Naruto was always left with questions. He rarely ever got answers to any important ones, only receiving the vague answer "we'll tell you when you're older." As he walked up and down the tree, leaves stuck to various points of his body, he thought about his friends. Ino still hadn't talked to him since that day and the little blonde went out of her way to ignore him if possible. It hurt to lose a friend, but Naruto learned a valuable lesson out of that. When someone wants nothing to do with you, cherish what you have and move on. Hinata's baby sister, Hanabi, had been born and their family was doing fine so far. Hinata's mother had contracted an illness though, and was constantly bedridden, leaving the little girl without her merry voice or kind words. She'd also been taken by Heishi to begin the learning points of Juken. The straightforward taijutsu style was an affront to Hinata's gentle nature, but she was trying her hardest not to disappoint. Kiba was spending more and more time becoming acquainted with Ninkins in hopes that he would receive his soon. His mother insisted he still had a few more years, but he held out hope. Shino had begun to cultivate his colony and communicate with them, and had become even more withdrawn. If Naruto wanted to see his silent friend, he had to make an effort to go to the Aburame district himself. And he didn't get to go often because he was busy himself. Shikamaru and Chuji were both as lazy as ever, their fathers not seeing the need to begin training them yet, insisting that kids could be kids for a little while longer. He didn't know how Ino was doing, but he hoped she was doing all right. Naruto sighed as he sat at the bottom of the tree. Guy had insisted he begin to meditate, and he found it boring. He was way too active a person to sit and hum for hours on end, but he had been told to do what his sensei said and he did or pretended to. Naruto's only true concerns at the moment were his taijutsu and his bunshin. He was okay with monkey style and average with Goken, but even Guy acknowledged they weren't fit for him. He couldn't bend enough with monkey style and he wasn't fit for Goken and its hard as rock punches. Guy had sworn to scour every library he could to find an appropriate style, but it was taking too long for Naruto's taste. He huffed as he stood and walked inside to get lunch. Today, Guy was on a mission and his grandfather was stamping papers and more than likely going stir-crazy. Perhaps he'd visit and break the monotony. Naruto said hello to his mother, who was busy feeding his new little brother, Konohamaru, way too long a name in his opinion, but they'd asked his grandfather to name the kid. Eri smiled as she watched him bug the cook for ramen and get bopped on the head with a wooden spoon. The old woman said he'd be getting a healthy lunch and not that slop he ate at Ichiraku's with his grandfather. Naruto pouted and sat on a stool at the table, his feet swinging off the side. So what are you going to do after lunch, Naruto? He looked at his mom and put a finger to his chin, a habit he had picked up from somewhere. I don't know. I was thinking of going to see Gigi and bug him for some help on the bunshin. I can't get it right no matter how much I try. I know I'm pouring too much chakra into it, but no matter how much I try, I can't get the right amount. It just takes so little. Eri sighed and readjusted Konohamaru to her other arm. Naruto, most ninja don't use the bunshin once they're out of the academy unless it's to set up a trap. It's a very basic form of genjutsu that is almost worthless to a high-level ninja. It's only taught at the academy to show the students the basics of more advanced techniques. Naruto stared at his mom open-mouthed and gawked. Mom, I thought you weren't a ninja. How do you know all that? Eri rolled her eyes and laughed. Sweetie, I'm married to a ninja and I'm married into a ninja family. They talk about jutsus like normal families talk about sports. It's impossible not to pick up on some things. Naruto had taken on an introspective look, and the gaze in his eyes somewhat worried Eri. So there are more powerful versions of the bunshin? There are more powerful versions of everything, honey. I'm not helping you though, you should ask your grandfather or Gai-sensei. Naruto nodded and ate his lunch slowly, thinking it over. He remembered reading about a Kage bunshin. Yes, Kage bunshin. But adequate information on it had been conveniently deleted from the scroll he had been reading. He was fairly certain it was a powerful technique, and he had his reasons for learning it. He'd studied theory with his father every night since he learned to read until he was sick of the word theory. But he had to admit, learning it was a help. He knew that the more chakra a jutsu took, the less control it demanded. Anyone could use a high-level jutsu if they pumped enough chakra into it. Control was what helped minimize the amount needed to its finest degree. If bunshin took such a small amount that he couldn't attain it, he would hone his control finer and find either information on the jutsu or find someone who could teach it to him. His grandfather loved it when he learned new things, so he wouldn't be mad for too long, although he'd probably get punished. It'd be worth it if he could just get past the bunshin jutsu. He said goodbye to his mother and made his way toward the Hokage tower to visit his grandfather, with the warning to be back for dinner. Naruto kept his leaves attached to his head as he walked, and he was glad that he had to concentrate on them somewhat. He hated walking through the village. It was the stairs, those god-awful stairs, and the whispers. He could hear them sometimes, like they spoke just loud enough so he could hear them. Demon brat. Look at him, walking like he owns the place. I wish he'd just disappear forever. Hokage-sama must be under the demon spell. Yandame-sama must be rolling over in his grave right now. Sure, he might hear us. He hated them somewhat. They talked bad about him and sometimes said mean things for no reason. They never hit him or beat him, but emotional wounds go deeper than physical wounds. Even though he had friends, even though he had a family, he couldn't make new friends, he couldn't play with any other children. It was like he had the plague. He waved to the guards at the door, and they smiled down at him. At least the ninjas looked upon him kindly. At the worst, they were indifferent or cold, but never spiteful. He had several that he liked. Enko was always fun to play with, and she had those really cool snakes. Genma was fun to be around, and one time Naruto had imitated him by leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets and a saban in his mouth, and the ninja had laughed long and hard before ruffling his hair. Hate was a kind man, but he was sickly and Naruto shied away from him. The ANBU, however, were the weirdest of the bunch. The masks freaked him out sometimes, since he couldn't see their expressions, only the soft voices and slight breathing. Speak of the devil. He grinned and waved at the gray-haired ANBU standing by the Hokage's office door, and the man turned to face him with his dog-faced mask. Ina never talked to him much, but he was okay, he guessed. Hello, Naruto. The Hokage is in a meeting right now, so have a seat. He should be through shortly. Inu was one of those who was indifferent at best. His voice never raised, and from what Naruto could tell with his limited dealings with those outside of his small circle, Inu was a very sad man. He seemed to live for his job and not much else. Naruto hopped onto the bench outside the door and swung his feet in time to his heartbeat. Inu sighed behind his mask and prepared himself for the onslaught of questions about to come. Quiet time simply wasn't possible with an inquisitive Naruto around. Hey Inu-san? Do you know how to do the bunshin? Inu's answer was to form the needed hand seal, and a copy of himself appeared. It disappeared just as quickly, and Naruto nodded before going back to being silent. 3, 2, 1. Hey Inu-san? Do you know a more powerful version of that jutsu? Inu raised an unseen eyebrow and shuffled his feet. He'd heard from several people the boy was an information sponge, always soaking up what he could. However, he also knew that Sarutobi had forbidden anyone to teach the boy ninjutsu, and he wasn't getting in trouble over a curious brat. He wanted to know what the boy was digging at, though. It would help pass the time. Why do you want to know? Naruto frowned and kicked his feet back and forth. He didn't think it would be as easy as asking. I can't do a simple bunshin. I just can't control the amount of chakra needed to make one. I've read before that the more power a jutsu takes, the easier it is to make. That's not entirely true. You need control as well. That's why it's necessary to learn the Academy Bunshin, no matter how useless it is. It promotes control. Yeah, but it shouldn't take such a long time to learn. How long is long? 5 months. Inu whistled low and nodded his head before standing bolt upright again. He could hear the people in the office moving around. Well, that's too bad, kid, but I can't help you. Your grandfather has forbidden anyone from helping you. You know that. Naruto sighed and put his face in his hands. Yeah, I know. I just thought it couldn't hurt to ask. It never hurts to ask, Naruto, but trying to get Inu in trouble? I'm disappointed and ashamed. Naruto grinned at the voice and looked up. But Gigi, it was just a question. He can't possibly teach me anything anyway. All he ever does is stand there. I can hear you, you know. Now, Inu, you know he didn't mean it, did you? I'm sorry. Sarutobi sighed and opened the door more, letting out the man standing behind him. Thank you for coming. I will have an answer for you in the future. That would be most appreciated, Hokage-sama. Naruto watched as the man walked down the hall and was ushered into the office by a slightly annoyed Inu, who shut the door behind him. Naruto sat down in the chair before the desk and looked over the veneer at his grandfather. So, Naruto, what brings you here today? I want to learn something more powerful than the bunshin. Sarutobi sighed and readied himself for the battle. Naruto, you know what I said. I know. But Gigi, I have a theory. Sarutobi was always happy to listen to a theory, even if he knew he was about to blow holes in it. He bridged his hands and puffed on his ever-present pipe. Alright. Convince me. Okay, you know how the less chakra a jutsu uses, the more control you have to have, right? Sarutobi nodded his head. Well, then on the other hand, the more chakra a jutsu takes, the less control it takes to bring the jutsu into existence. You still have to have control, but only to fine-tune the jutsu so it doesn't require so much chakra. I can't seem to get the control low enough for the regular bunshin, so would you please teach me a different one? Sarutobi sat back in his chair and puffed away on his pipe. He was impressed with his grandson's argument. The boy was 5, but he had been taking his studies seriously. He wanted nothing more than to make his family proud, and that was a boon. He had been ecstatic to learn henge and kawarimi, and was fast on his way to mastering them. His solid form henge was a wonder as well. That would require more research. But teaching him a more powerful bunshin? He was only 5. Could he handle the power? Well, of course he could handle the power, but could he handle the responsibility of that power? Would he flaunt it, or would he be prudent with it? Sarutobi sighed, a cloud of smoke billowing from his mouth. What would you do if I taught you a better bunshin? Naruto was ecstatic. This was as close as he'd probably get, but he had to take that leap. I'd work with it until I mastered it, and then I'd ask for another. Sarutobi smiled and clenched the pipe in his teeth. He remembered another child who wouldn't rest until he had mastered a jutsu taught to him. Jiraiya had been a stickler for learning. He didn't just learn a jutsu, he bent it, tweaked it, perfected it. He didn't rest until he had made it perfect, and then he asked for more. Perhaps, it would not be a bad idea. 5 months was a long time not being able to use a bunshin after all. If I do this, you are not to let others know about it except me and Guy. Understood? Naruto nodded vigorously and grinned happily. Sarutobi grinned back and waved his hand. Now go home, scamp, I have work to do. I'll show you the jutsu tonight. Naruto practically flew home. Sarutobi sighed as he walked inside the house. He could see Naruto in the backyard, balancing on one foot on a tree branch, sticking leaves to multiple parts of his body. He hung his hat and robe on the hook by the door and walked out back. Naruto saw his sensei coming and leapt out of the tree, trembling with anticipation. Sarutobi raised his hand, signaling for silence. The bunshin I will show you is not to be shown to anyone else. I want to say that again. When you get older, I will tell you when it is okay to use it outside of training. Now then, watch what I do. This will help you form the Tsuchi bunshin. Sarutobi ran through the hand seals slowly, Naruto mocking him, trying to get them right. Once he was comfortable that the boy had it down, he dropped his hands to the sides. As time goes on, you will find that jutsu such as these will become easier to use, and eventually you will be able to use only one seal or none at all. You will know how the chakra is molded, and it will help make you a better, unpredictable ninja. Now try to mold the chakra correctly. It took 7 tries, but finally Naruto was able to form a Tsuchi bunshin. He leapt this way and that, cheering loudly, before he was smacked on the head and stood quietly again. That was very good, but now I expect you to train with this until you have it down. I hadn't meant to teach you a jutsu this advanced this early, but it was necessary, I suppose. Practice it more until dinner time. I will come to fetch you. Naruto nodded and flipped through the hand seals again as Sarutobi walked inside. The old Hokage flopped into an armchair and sank back into the aged leather. Here, amongst his sanctuary of old scrolls and books, he felt safe and at peace. No one bothered him here, and he was free to research what he pleased. Currently, he was flipping through some scrolls from Whirlpool Country, trying to find anything about Naruto's distant family. The Uzumakis, so named because he didn't know any other surname for Naruto's mother's family, were a reclusive and private family, but they left good records and detailed birth certificates. He was looking for anything on the melt, the bloodline he thought the child might have. He read that it only manifested once every 10 generations, and only in the strongest of the children. There weren't many details about it. The Uzumakis didn't want their children used as breeding fodder for a Kekai Genkai that wasn't guaranteed to manifest or to be in danger constantly of being kidnapped by neighboring villages. What he did find was intriguing and raised more questions. The bloodline was actually a genetic defect that made itself known a few years before puberty in most. One child had been documented as manifesting as early as 4, but Naruto was past that. The infuriating thing was that they made no mention what the damn thing did. Calling it the melt left so many open possibilities. Based on stealth and help form the ninja world. He found another scroll and quirked an eyebrow. Uzumakis were natural-born assassins, and there were several documented episodes of their assassination skills. If Naruto manifested this bloodline, there was no reason not to teach him the ways of the assassin. He would need to learn to be quiet somehow. Sarutobi put the scrolls back and looked at the grandfather clock in the corner of the room. He needed to gather Naruto up and head for the table. Eri would be angry if he kept the boy outside all night. As he walked down the hall, he thought toward the future. Assassination was a skill the boy would have to learn. That meant that he would have to make a kill someday, and the idea pained him that the innocent child would have to take a life. But to truly understand the fragility and precious quality of a life, you must take one, so you can protect those you love. A ninja's trade demanded no less. His eyes widened as he stared out into the yard and saw Naruto running through the seals, 10 copies of himself standing around, loitering. Sarutobi walked up and they all turned and smiled, speaking in a collective voice. Hi Gigi. Naruto, dispel your clones and come inside. Dinner's ready. The blonde let his bunchin sink into the ground and stood up, the exertion clear on his face. But a trace of pride was there also. He had proven that he could do more powerful jutsu and, even though it might be a while before he learned another, he had time to perfect this one. He followed his grandfather inside wordlessly. Sarutobi walked in front, his hands behind his back. He didn't look back as he spoke. I'm proud of you, Naruto. Naruto groaned and banged his head on the table before him. His grandfather had thought it would be a fine time to introduce Naruto to the joys of paperwork, and the little boy had been ecstatic to learn more about being Hokage until he met the mounds of parchment. He sighed and looked over to where Sarutobi was signing away at whatever was in front of him, his pipe billowing like a smokestack, small curses coming from his lips. He turned to the small blonde sitting at the table next to him, and took his pipe from between his teeth. Looking at the clock, he groaned. That's it. Come on, Naruto, we're going for a walk. I'm sure you're tired of sorting those papers. Hi, Sensei. Sarutobi nodded to the guard at the door and they walked out into the street in front of the Hokage tower, stretching the kinks from their bodies. So Naruto, where shall we go? I don't know, Sensei, you're the one who wanted to leave. Sarutobi laughed and shook his head. It was true, he hated being cooped up for long. Well, let's go do a little shopping, Perhaps we can finally find you a weapon that would suit you. I don't know, Sensei. Nothing sticks out, and I'm not tall enough yet for a staff. The old Kage sighed and nodded to people as they passed. The ones with harsh glares for Naruto received a dose of his killing intent. Naruto, I believe we've established that, as unfortunate for me as it is, you simply aren't built to use most of my styles. But jutsu just isn't you. Neither is monkey-style taijutsu. And Guy was heartbroken when he found you weren't a match for Goken. But on the other hand, that leaves several possibilities for you. You don't have to follow our paths, instead you can beat out your own. Yeah, but it's hard learning from someone when they are learning along with you. Guy-sensei and I have tried several different styles and none have worked. He learns just as much as I do. I'm supposed to be the student. Naruto, one universal truth you must accept is that you never stop learning. The day you stop learning is the day you die and disappear. Knowledge is like a mighty river, always flowing and you can't help but be swept up by its current. You can safely drink from it at times, but the true thrill is diving in and letting it take you away to unknown territories. Sensei, you're preaching again. Sarutobi laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. So I was. But you have to understand that I learn something every day. Life is learning and you never stop. He let Naruto think on that as they continued their walk. Before long, they had arrived at the weapons shop. Sarutobi loved to come here and walk amongst the weapons, testing the staffs and flipping the kunai back and forth. He hadn't allowed Naruto to use anything more than blunt kunai for target practice, and the boy had proven a dab hand with throwing weapons, but he still needed a melee weapon for those up-close and personal encounters. They stepped inside and Sarutobi nodded to the owner before walking to the back and weighing the staffs in his hands. He disliked many of them, but then again, most weapons were poor when compared to endless staff transformation. Sarutobi snatched a heavy oaken staff from the display and twirled it in the air before settling it behind his back in a crouch. One reason he loved this particular store was the large areas between the weapons and the high ceilings, allowing you to try out your hopefully future purchases. Naruto wandered around the racks, running his fingers over the staffs before shaking his head and heading for something more pointy. He picked up a sword but quickly put it back. He wasn't big and strong enough for swords yet. Instead, he meandered over to the daggers and kunai. Somewhere in Naruto's mind, he just got tickled looking at knives. It was like he had a genetic predisposition to them. He knew soon he would have to start training with weapons for real, but he still had as of yet to find one that suited him. Kunai were used by everyone. Shuriken were used by everyone. He wanted a unique weapon, one that would make him stand out. There were several kenjutsu masters, and his grandfather was renowned for bojutsu. His uncle Asuma, who he had never met, was a master with trench knives. Naruto vaguely heard Sarutobi chatting with the proprietor of the establishment, and went back to his browsing. The knives here were either too ornate or too plain. None had that edge he wanted. He frowned and turned away from them. Perhaps he should look at knuckle dusters. He sighed as he quickly brushed away that thought. Way too plain and brutal. With knives there was a subtlety that was close to poetry. He'd watched Enko play with hers often enough as she waited in the Hokage's lobby that he knew they were a force to be reckoned with. But knives also had a drawback. They were good as throwing weapons, but they demanded that you be up close and personal. Swords gave you a little bit of distance, knives demanded that you be close as you took a life. He picked up a plain-looking dagger and twirled it in his hands like Enko had shown him. It lacked balance for throwing but felt pleasant in the hand. He put it back with a shake of his head. He still couldn't find anything that suited him. Sarutobi frowned as he spoke with the owner. They had both been watching as Naruto rummaged through the weapons, and he was still quite dismayed that Naruto didn't like any of them. I don't know what to think, Kawas. He just can't seem to get comfortable with any weapons. Most children his age think any kind of sword or sharp thing is cool. Naruto just looks upon them with disdain. Hokage-sama, perhaps the child just isn't ready yet. I've heard of the training regimen you and Gaisen put him through. He has a lot on his plate. And you said earlier he had started helping you with your paperwork. Hi, I did. And he is a big help, even though I have to catch him sometimes putting things in the wrong pile. He has his own ideas about what is important and what isn't. You know, his 6th birthday is coming up in a few days. Of course. The day of the festival. Will you be attending? Sarutobi frowned and knocked his pipe out against his leg. I'll give my yearly speech, but after that I shall retire to my home. We have a party planned for Naruto and all his little friends. The celebration is mostly for the civilians anyway. The clans will be attending Naruto's party. It's an occasion for them to catch up with each other and watch the children be children. Plus, Eri makes the most delicious cakes. The owner of the shop laughed and slapped his hand on the counter. Imagine the Hokage of all people being weak-kneed for his daughter-in-law's cooking. Sarutobi chuckled along with the man and patted Naruto on the head as he wandered up. Find anything to your liking? Naruto shook his head in the negative and Sarutobi sighed heavily. Don't worry. One day, you'll find the weapon you want and I'll train you to the fullest in it. We can't do everything at once. Naruto nodded and they said their farewells to the owner of the shop. As they walked back to the tower, Sarutobi smiled down. What do you say to lunch before we go back to our dreary job? The small blonde nodded vigorously. Sarutobi smiled as he watched Naruto and his friends play in the yard. Kiba and Naruto were entirely too energetic, and it showed in their game of tag. Hinata and Shino did their best to keep up while Shikamaru and Shuji sat to the side, too lazy to do anything but watch. He looked over to the adults and smiled at their obvious comfort. They were enjoying themselves as much as the children. Noticeably absent was little Ino, though Inoichi had seen fit to come. Sarutobi sat back again with his notes on the Uzumakis and read a little more. Naruto's father had been an absolute brute on the battlefield, the ultimate frontliner. A few special kunai thrown around the battlefield and he could decimate an army. Little was known about his better half, although from what he'd read so far, he would guess she was an assassin like the rest of her relations. He couldn't be too sure though. He heard Naruto laugh and lifted his head to see Kiba sprawled out on the ground, holding his nose. The boy had run headfirst into a tree and now everyone was laughing. He ran to Tsum, who gave him a hug and told him to be a big boy about it and sent him back out to play. Sarutobi shook his head and sighed. It wouldn't be long before playtime would be over and they'd be sent out to act in honor of their village. He stiffened a little when he read a particular excerpt from the scroll he'd found. He hadn't noticed it or had thought it inconsequential at the time, but it caught his eye now. Those born with the defect can allow nature to swallow them whole. He didn't know what to make of that. They were assassins of the highest caliber, and now it was too frustrating. He sat the notes down and watched the children play some more, before he felt someone standing at his side. Hokage-sama. Ah, guy. What can I help you with? I just wanted to drop in and wish Naruto-kun a happy birthday. It isn't often he gets a day like this anymore. I agree. I keep the boy quite busy when you're not teaching him. How is he progressing, by the way? Quite well. He isn't a master, but he won't be helpless when it comes to taijutsu. He showed me his Tsuchi Bunshin the other day finally. He is quite proficient with it. Hi, I am quite proud of him for learning it so quickly and improving himself with it. He's come far in 2 years. Hi, he has. Excuse me, Hokage-sama, I'm going to give Naruto his gift before I have to go. Sarutobi nodded and pulled his pipe out, but found his hands suddenly full. He blinked at the little bundle shoved into his arms and found himself looking up at a fuming Eri. Hold him please while I go inside and change. What happened? Your grandson thought it would be a good idea to upchuck all over my new dress. I'll be right back. Sarutobi chuckled and bounced Konohamaru on his knee while the little boy squealed with delight. You shouldn't have done that, you know. Now your mother will be upset with you. Konohamaru just giggled. The four children lay on the ground panting from their efforts to catch one another. Kiba and Naruto had finally called a truce and decided to relax. Shikamaru and Chuji ambled over as they all sat in a circle and chattered. Mom says that I might be able to get a Nikken in a couple years, but I want one now. She just doesn't understand. Kiba-kun, maybe you just aren't ready yet. Kiba gave Hinata a pouting look, and she giggled into her hand. Naruto grinned at his feral friend and fanged fellow. Maybe you aren't, Kiba, but don't worry. When you get one, I'm sure it'll be really cool. Shino pushed his miniature shades up his nose and nodded. Hi, Kiba, but having a companion is also a large responsibility. My Kikai bugs require constant watching, and father has told me that the older I get, the larger the colonies get. They will require even more care. Kiba hung his head lower and sighed. He hated the word responsibility. Before any more conversation could start up, the group heard footsteps and turned to see a very muscular man clad in green. Naruto beamed and leapt to his feet. Guy-sensei. YOSH. Hello, Naruto Kyuen. I hope you are having a most youthful birthday. A collective scream of his name from the adults made Guy wince and rub his head sheepishly before turning to a group of wide-eyed youngsters and one grinning Jinchuriki. He knelt down in front of Naruto and produced a scroll from his belt. Naruto cocked his head to the side and pointed at the scroll. What's that, sensei? This, Naruto, is a sealing scroll. Inside of it is your birthday present. Tell me, have you studied seals yet? Naruto shook his head and Guy sighed. I would suggest you study them then. There aren't many seal masters in the world, and it is a sorely needed skill in this world. I'll show you how to use them, and you can keep the scroll as well to study, okay? Naruto nodded, and all the kids watched as Guy used his chakra to unseal Naruto's present. Out from the scroll popped 2 books, 2 bags full of what looked like game pieces, and a double-sided game board. Naruto looked at his teacher, his eyes asking the unspoken question. This, Naruto, is a game board for playing Shugi and Go. These games have been revered throughout the ages as helping to hone awareness and strategy for the battlefield. I want you to learn how to play them, and when you do, we'll play a game. A healthy mind is just as essential as a healthy body. Never let it be said I have a totally one-track mind. Naruto hugged his sensei's neck and thanked him for the gift, while the others looked strangely at Shikamaru. He was looking hungrily at the game board, as if he wanted to claim it as his own. Once Guy left, and Naruto sat back down, Shikamaru pointed to the game board. Are you going to learn to play? Naruto shrugged and grinned. I intend to. If Guy-sensei says it will help me, then I'll learn. Shikamaru grinned and flopped down in front of Naruto, the board between them. I can show you how to play. I love having someone to play board games with. You know how to play these? Shikamaru nodded his head vigorously and flipped through the book. These are basic books on strategy, but you'll like them. When you want to learn to play, come find me and I'll set up the game. Okay. The rest of Naruto's birthday party was typical of any young boys. They had cake, played a few more games, and then he opened his presents. Most were typical of a little boy: a few games, some clothes. Hinata had gotten him a necklace depicting a fox chasing its tail. He hugged her neck and thanked her. She smiled at him shyly and said he was welcome. The adults all congratulated him and patted him on the head or slapped him on the back. He finally came to his grandfather, who stood with his hands behind his back. Sarutobi had remembered from a previous shopping trip what they called getting the hell out of the office when paperwork became too much. That Naruto had admired some hats he had seen and had gone back to have one commissioned. He smiled down at his grandson. I hope you've enjoyed your birthday this year, Naruto. Today was a free day, you know. Tomorrow, it's back to business as usual. Now I have 2 presents for you. Naruto's face lit up and he literally bounced on the balls of his feet. He hoped it was a jutsu. I'll be teaching you a jutsu. Yes. At our next training session. It's a D rank, so don't expect anything spectacular. Naruto's smile slipped a little, but quickly came back. At least he was learning something new. Now, as for your other gift, well, it's easier just to show you. From behind his back, Sarutobi presented Naruto with a copy of his Hokage's hat. The little boy laughed happily and sat the hat on his head. On top of it was the kanji reading Shadow of the Shadow. Naruto loved it. Sarutobi laughed and clapped the boy on the shoulder. You can't take mine yet, but that should tide you over for now. I expect you to wear it when we're in the office, of course. Naruto nodded his head hard, causing the silken hat to bob up and down. Everyone laughed at his enthusiasm and Sarutobi clapped his hands together. Now, how about we get some ice cream before everyone leaves? Naruto grumbled to himself as he separated the papers into their respective piles. He hated this part of the job and doing it by himself was a chore. But he knew it was part of what he was learning, it was all a part of being Hokage. He heard his sensei sigh as he stamped another form and let his head fall to the desk. Desk jobs were so boring. Naruto, keep separating those papers. The sooner you get them separated, the sooner I can sign them, the sooner we can go home. Naruto nodded and picked up a document, skimming over it. Some farmers in the southern part of Fire Country wanted a ninja to come and kill a pack of wolves that were terrorizing the livestock. Sweet Kami, don't these people know how to fend for themselves? Find one of interest, Naruto? He turned to his sensei and shook his head. Sensei, why are there so many worthless missions? Killing wolves? Grubbing potatoes? These are things that anyone could do. Hi, they are. But these are missions that are used to promote teamwork among our genin teams. That's why I need you to separate them by urgency and difficulty. I know, but it seems so stupid? Well, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, it seems stupid. It does to me at times too. Now then, let's get those separated and we'll go home to work on that jutsu, I promise you. Naruto flew through his paperwork like a man possessed. Naruto stood before his sensei practically giddy with excitement. He was going to learn another technique. He couldn't even guess what this one could do. Sarutobi stood before him with a smile on his face as well. He loved having a young, willing student. The jutsu I'm about to show you is, as I told you before, a D rank, and while not useful on the battlefield, is practical for getting around quickly outside of a fight. Naruto cocked his head to the side, wondering what it could be. He watched as Sarutobi formed a single-hand seal and poofed across the clearing in the blink of an eye. He disappeared from the spot beside Naruto in a swirl of leaves and reappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto watched as he formed the hand seal again and reappeared back in front of him. That was the Shunshin Naruto. It is used to go short to medium distances in the blink of an eye. It is great for getting around at fast speeds in daily life but isn't very useful on the battlefield. Truly skilled ninjas can sense chakra, and the Shunshin is a dead giveaway that you are approaching. It emits a level of chakra into the air that creates a small vortex that raises sand, leaves, or any debris off the ground. It is, however, a fun jutsu to use. Now try. Naruto concentrated on the hand seal, molded the chakra properly, and promptly smashed into the tree before him. Sarutobi roared with laughter and helped the boy to his feet. That was a good first try, Naruto, but you need to visualize where you're going. You can't have too broad an area, otherwise that happens. Now envision yourself on the roof of the house and place yourself there. Naruto nodded his head and concentrated. He imagined himself standing on the roof and felt the tingle as the chakra wound its way through his body and wrapped itself around him before yanking him upward and onto the roof. The entire process took less than a second and Naruto opened his eyes to find leaves swirling around him. He waved down at his sensei. Sarutobi smiled and waved back. That was very good, but once again, you need to practice to make it useful and to make it easier to use. Work on it until supper and I'll come fetch you again. Naruto nodded and Sarutobi watched as he shined across the yard and into the side of the servants' quarters. The old Hokage shook his head and chuckled under his breath as he walked inside. Yahiko watched as his father taught his son the Shunshin and nearly died from laughter when the boy crashed headlong into a tree. Watching Naruto made him wonder about his brother, Asuma. He watched his father head into his private study and followed in behind him. Sarutobi glanced up when he saw his son enter and swung high head back down to continue reading. Father, have you received any word from Asuma lately? Sarutobi sighed and closed the book he had been reading before rubbing the bridge of his nose. No, there has been no word from him since he left to join the Guardians. I don't know if we'll ever hear from him until he wants to come back home. I wish he would though. Why? Another hand in Naruto's training? The aging Hokage frowned at his son and leaned back in his chair. Not just that, no. I miss my son and I'd rather not see him off getting killed for something I don't believe in. We didn't part on the most amicable terms, you know that. I just want my son back home. Forgive me, father, I didn't mean to be rude. No need for apologizing. I admit sometimes I am hard on Naruto, and he needs more training than you can imagine. There have been many prodigies younger than him that have become full-fledged ninja, you know. I know, but it doesn't change the fact that he is my son and I don't want his childhood to evaporate. It won't. I promise. You have to trust that I'm doing what's best for everyone, Naruto included. It's been 2 years since he began to learn jutsus and so far, he only knows 4. That's pitifully low for one of his ability, and I'm going to have to start upping his ninjutsu training. I'll have to try to find a genjutsu master though. It takes time to explain the nuances and requirements for those and I don't have the patience or time. I don't know what else to do. The boy is abysmal in the genjutsu area. He can't even recognize one half the time. Sarutobi lit his pipe and took an extra long drag. He let the smoke envelop his head and closed his eyes. How are his studies coming along? Yahiko ran his hand through his hair and exhaled. They're coming along splendidly, although, after Guy's little show with the ceiling scroll at his birthday, he wants to learn more about Fuinjutsu. He seems to think there are possibilities there that he can explore. I began to teach him how to play Go and Shugi last night as well. And? He's learning slowly. Naruto learns by doing, so it will take several tries before he learns all the nuances and subtleties that make up the games. He tries to be too forward when he plays. Well, he is only 6. He'll learn quickly though. Hi, but the thing is when he's backed into a corner, he can pull off brilliant moves that I never would have read or thought possible. But it only comes in small flashes. Perhaps we can cultivate that mind to think more outside the box. Perhaps. They sat in silence for a while until Sarutobi suddenly perked up. Yahiko, tell me what you think of this. The younger of the two read the small passage and handed the parchment back to his father. I have no idea what that could mean. Do you still believe that Naruto might harbor some kind of Kekai Genkai? I do. He's been nothing but one surprise after another, so it would stand to reason. A knock at the door made them both turn and Eri popped her head in. Dinner's ready. If one of you would round up Naruto? Sarutobi stood, cracking his back and groaned. I'll fetch him. I want to see how he's doing with the Shunshin anyway. Yahiko nodded and followed after his wife, leaving his father to walk outside. Sarutobi hummed to himself as he paced toward the door to go outside. He silently wondered if the boy had come along with the jutsu or not. Knowing Naruto, he had probably figured it out finally and was teleporting back and forth across the yard, coming dangerously close to tiring himself out. He opened the door and came face to face with the Shunshin using Naruto. Hi Gigi. I think I got it down pretty good. That's very good, Naruto. Show me. Naruto nodded and walked back to the middle of the yard. He formed the needed seal and was gone in a swirl of leaves to appear on the roof of the adjacent building. Before Sarutobi could call out, he reappeared again on the tree out back and disappeared one more time before reappearing in front of his grandfather, smile blindingly obvious. That's excellent, Naruto, but you have to be careful not to overexert yourself. Using that jutsu that many times in succession could have ill effects on the body. Probably not yours, per se, but I'd rather not find out. Okay Gigi, I'll be careful. Can I use this jutsu to get from here to your office from now on? I don't think you can reach from here to there. What if I push more chakra into the move? Theoretically that would work, but I don't know that for sure. How about letting me see if it's possible before you try that, okay? Okay Gigi. Good. Now supper's ready, let's go eat. Several weeks later found Naruto back in the office again, sorting papers as Sarutobi grumbled and grunted as he stamped and signed away. Naruto was frantically sorting the papers into piles and shoving them onto the desk where they were looked over quickly and then put into the outbox. Sarutobi looked over at his grandson and smiled discreetly. The hat had become a permanent fixture on the little boy's head, and it never ceased to amaze him how much he looked like Minato, especially since he had insisted that Naruto wear robes while he tended to his duties. The blonde had protested loudly that he hated wearing robes and wanted to continue wearing his shorts and t-shirts, but a powerful glare from his grandfather made him hush. In that office you are to look respectable and dignified. This matter is not up for negotiation. Is that clear? Hi, Sensei. He hadn't meant to sound so harsh, but Naruto's head was notoriously thick if he didn't want to do something. A firm word was usually all that was needed to put him in his place. He watched as Naruto skimmed over the documents and threw them into an appropriate pile before paper clipping them and shoving them onto the desk. He couldn't ask for a more able helper, although it was free labor for the village, a training mission if you will. Sarutobi suddenly remembered that he had left an important document at the compound and needed it signed by that day. He couldn't leave, but he could send Naruto. The boy would be grateful for the opportunity to leave for a few minutes. Naruto, I need you to run an errand. The boy didn't even look up, just kept sorting the papers. Sarutobi smiled. At least he was learning to multitask, a vital skill for a seasoned Hokage. Hi, Sensei. What do you need me to do? I forgot an important document at the house. Could you run fetch it, please? Naruto growled and pushed back from the desk. He was so close to finishing before lunch too. Without thinking, he formed the seal for Shunshin and disappeared, leaving a wide-eyed Sarutobi in his wake. Naruto swept into the study of his grandfather quickly and acquired the document before making the seal again and poofing away. Sarutobi had been counting on the clock how long it took for the boy to get back. Walking was a good 15 minutes away, at a ninja sprint a good 5. Naruto was back in 3. The old Hokage took the paper offered him and watched as his apprentice went back to his sorting like nothing had happened. A child shouldn't be able to Shunshin that far. Most adults couldn't make it more than a couple hundred yards if they were in top shape and great at control. Naruto, how did you get this? He didn't look up from his sorting. I used Shunshin to get into your study. How? The boy looked up exasperated. Sensei, I did it just like you told me. I used the seal, molded the chakra, and applied control while envisioning where I wanted to be. Naruto, do you know how far away home is from here? Not very by Shunshin? Naruto, home is over a mile away. You shouldn't have been able to do that, especially while distracted. I'm sorry? I won't do it again, I promise. No. It's not that. You just surprised me. Once again. Naruto nodded and went back to doing his paperwork. Sarutobi kept his eye on the boy for a moment and nearly had a heart attack when he witnessed what he thought was a miracle. Naruto wasn't paying attention and had grasped for another paperclip on the desk but couldn't find one. He wondered why his hand felt weird, turned his head to see what was the matter, and found his hand sunk into the desk. He gasped and jerked it out quickly, holding it by the wrist with his other hand. Sarutobi watched out of the corner of his eyes as the boy knocked his fist into his hand, making sure they were corporeal. He didn't say anything though, just observed. Naruto, satisfied that his hand was whole and that he wasn't crazy, chalked it up to doing too much paperwork. His mind was starting to play tricks on him. Just to be sure, he touched his hand to the desk again and found the surface solid and smooth. Sighing in relief, he returned to his sorting. Sarutobi was nearly hyperventilating. He had just seen his grandson put his hand not through the desk, but into the desk. If this was what he thought it was, the boy had so much potential it wasn't funny. He didn't say anything about what he saw and went back to writing, but he cut his eyes to Naruto every so often and found no change. The child must have thought it was a trick of his eyes and played it off. But Sarutobi knew different. The boy's hand had actually gone into the desk. It had melted into the desk before his very eyes. He had a gem in his office and he now fully intended to polish it until it shone brightly. He returned to his paperwork with a flourish. They needed to get out of this office as soon as possible. He and Naruto had work to do. It was now 5 months after Naruto's 7th birthday, and he had developed his Shunshin so that he could teleport both him and his grandfather to and from work. But using it like that drained him considerably when Sarutobi traveled with him. Just one of the limitations that he had found out as he went. It didn't bother him much though. He knew from how his grandfather talked that it was pretty impressive. He'd had his mental regimen upped in the past few months and routinely spent a few hours each week playing Shugi and Go against Shikamaru and Guy. Yahiko was more prone to playing puzzles and had passed on a love of them to Naruto. Before he went to bed at night, he usually tried to solve a few brain teasers. His father said it kept his mind sharp. Naruto just knew that it helped his brain go to sleep at night. He hadn't had anything happen like that one day ever again. He thought it was a trick of the mind that he had seen his hand disappear into the wood of the desk he sat at. But in the back of his mind, there was something that told him it had been real. He had watched as his hand sank into the veneer. If only there was some way to be sure. Currently, Naruto was on his way to the Aburame's district to see Shino, with a butterfly he'd caught cupped in his hands. Hello, Naruto. It's been quite a while since I last saw you. Hey, Shino. Gigi keeps me really busy, so I don't have time for fun stuff as much anymore. I caught this butterfly and wanted to know if you guys already had one like it. Shino looked in between Naruto's laced fingers and pushed his sunglasses further up his nose. I believe we already have that species, but another is always a welcome addition. Come. We'll see if father has a pod to put it in. Naruto nodded vigorously and walked beside his friend. Shino was never one much for conversation. He just said what needed to be said and then shut up. But Naruto was always able to drag a few extra words out of him somehow. Mostly because he wasn't afraid to discuss insects with him. So, how's your colony doing? They are currently at an optimum level of efficiency. I have begun to converse with them and have been making strides to facilitate a bargain so that we can work together. Naruto blinked at his friend and sighed. If the others had been here, except for Shikamaru, they would have been so lost. Shino was raised on logic and the application of such. Shino, you really need to learn to use more common words when talking to others. If our other friends were here, they wouldn't have understood you. Shino turned his head slightly and poked his glasses again. It was a habit he'd picked up from his father over the years when he was either annoyed or explaining something. But you do understand me. There is no logical reason for me to change my speech patterns at the current moment. Geez, Shino, just act like a 7-year-old once in a while. You talk like a grown-up all the time. They continued on for a few feet before Shino spoke again. My family believes that logic rules all, Naruto, and therefore I am expected to speak in a logical and mature manner as befits an Aburame. I cannot help it that you still deign to speak like a common street thug when your upbringing dictates otherwise. Naruto put a comical scowl on his face and puffed his cheeks out. I'm not a common thug. I just choose to speak in layman's terms so I am easily understood by everyone. Now you're speaking like an Aburame. Only because I have to rise to your level to actually get a conversation out of you. You're such an elitist. I'm not an elitist. I just converse with more flair than the rest of you. It's not my fault I make you keep a higher standard. Naruto sighed and shook his head. At least you're not a stuck-up jerk like that Uchiha kid. What was his name again? I believe his name is Sasuke. Yeah, him. He's such a jerk. I introduced myself to him, and he turned his nose up at me and called me a demon before walking away. Said his father said that I was a demon among men. That is illogical. My Kikai are sensitive to chakra signatures and they have not detected anything demonic about you, only that you have very high chakra levels for a kid our age. Naruto grinned and they turned a corner to Shibi's office. Yeah, I'm awesome like that. Shino turned to look at him as he turned and knocked on the door and waited for his father to call for them to enter. They also say you have the scent of a fox, but give no explanation. Naruto shrugged and grinned again. That's what Kiba tells me. No one can give me an answer. Shino nodded and pushed the door open. Hello, son, Naruto-san. What can I help you with? Father, Naruto has brought a butterfly to us. I believe that we already have one in captivity, but it is always good to have more. Do we have a pod to put it in? Shibi looked at the butterfly in Naruto's outstretched hands and nodded. Yes, I believe the pod by your aunt's house will accept it. I'm sorry, Naruto-san, but I need to teach some things to Shino today. I can't allow him to play. It wasn't apparent if Shino was frowning or not, but there was a slight buzz from his Kikai bugs. Naruto smiled and bowed to Shibi. That's alright. I was on my way to meet Gai-sensei for another taijutsu lesson. I just stopped by because I caught the butterfly. I apologize if I interrupted anything. Shibi raised his eyebrows slightly and pushed his glasses up his nose further. It's quite alright. There was nothing interrupted yet. Good luck with your lessons, Naruto-san. Naruto nodded and left out the door, shutting it behind him. Shibi turned to Shino and rolled his shoulders slightly. I'm glad that you associate with that child, Shino. He is a good influence on you, and you on him. How so, father? You influence Naruto to act rationally, and in your presence he is not as rash as he is with, say, Kiba. In addition, he is someone that you can identify with and spend time with as a friend. It is beneficial for the both of you. Shibi stood and walked toward his son. Now come. I wish to test your progress with your colony. Hello, Naruto Kyuen. Are your flames of youth ready to shine brightly today? Sure, Gai-sensei. Are we going to try a new style today? So quiet, Naruto-kun. But yes, we will try a new style today. I hope that this one will fit you, but we'll have to see. Have you succeeded yet in defeating Shikamaru in Shugi? Naruto shook his head no. Do not worry. One day you will defeat him. Shikamaru is a sleeping genius that is not to be taken lightly. When you finally defeat him, it will shock him and he will redouble his efforts to beat you the next time, making you redouble your own efforts in a never-ending whirlwind of youthfulness. While Guy-sensei, can we please just do today's lesson? Guy sighed and stood straight again. Hi, I suppose we can. You need to let go of your youthful self sometimes, Naruto-kun, and not be so serious. It isn't conducive to a young boy's growth if he is so uptight. Gigi doesn't like it when I'm loud, Guy-sensei, so I kind of like to keep it down. Guy put his thumb to his chin and closed his eyes, as if thinking. He suddenly sprang into his nice guy pose and let the sun glint off his teeth. YOSH. Then if you cannot show your youthfulness through the raising of your voice, I will do it enough for both of you. Guy-sensei, I don't think you should do that. People get mad when you get too loud, remember? Ah yes, that's correct. Well, we'll let youthfulness slide for a moment and get on with your training. I found a style known as Kalaripayat, a style that promotes disabling strikes and elevates the strike's intensity as the fight goes on. It's very ancient and very complete. Guy settled into the unfamiliar stance and Naruto mimicked him. Just follow my movements and flow through the kata. After a couple of hours of getting used to it, we'll try to apply what we've learned. Naruto nodded and fell into the pace, letting his arms flow back and forth and placing his feet with care. A couple hours later, Naruto was moving slowly through a practical application of the art with a Tsuchi Bunshin, when Guy called a halt to the procedures. I'd like to try it with you now, Naruto-kun. We'll start slow and progressively get faster. By the time we're finished, hopefully we'll be going at about half speed. Ready? Ready, sensei. Guy moved in slowly and the two began to exchange a series of blows and kicks, bowing and ducking out of the way. As they became more comfortable with the style, they began to speed up until the sounds of fists on flesh echoed across the clearing. They weren't hitting hard enough to hurt one another too seriously, but the blows still brought winces. They were enjoying themselves immensely, and as time passed, it became less of a training exercise and more of a spar. Guy, in a moment of pure unyouthfulness, kicked Naruto a bit harder than he meant to and watched as the boy sailed toward a tree. He knew he couldn't catch him in time and watched as Naruto tried to halt his flight. Naruto had known the exercise was becoming a bit more heated as they went on but hadn't expected his sensei to kick him so hard. He had turned so that he flew face first toward the tree and tried to duck to protect his face. When he didn't register hitting the tree, he opened his eyes to find himself looking at the world in a totally different way. Guy stood with a slack jaw and his hands at his sides. His student had just disappeared. As he hit the tree, the boy just went poof, gone, bye-bye. Guy let out a bellow and ran for the tree, searching all around it frantically. Naruto watched the world in shades of black and white. His sensei was frantically checking everything around the tree and Naruto couldn't figure out why he could see as if he was inside something. He moved his arm around and found that he could see an outline of his body, but not the actual skin. It was alarming. Guy-sensei? Guy heard the muffled voice and stopped running around. Naruto? Where are you? I don't know. But you're right in front of me. Hang on, let me try something. Guy stood stock still and watched with great fascination as Naruto's tan hand emerged from the tree, the rest of his upper torso following. Guy began to hyperventilate as Naruto raised out of the tree as if he was part of it, and eventually settled back on level ground. Naruto, what just happened? What did you do? The blonde recoiled from the sudden seriousness and backed against the tree. I don't know. I was heading toward the tree and thought about how much it would hurt, and I closed my eyes, and when I opened them everything was black and white. I could hear you and I could feel the vibrations when you touched the tree, but everything was in black and white. My body was only an outline but nothing hurt. I kinda felt at peace. Guy stood upright and grabbed Naruto by the shoulder. Naruto, take us to the Hokage. He needs to hear about this. Ha, Guy-sensei. Naruto formed the needed seal and they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sarutobi had been trying to relax in a rare moment of peace and quiet. He had the door locked, the windows drawn closed, and all the paperwork was, for once, caught up for the most part. He had just opened up his favorite little orange book, and was just about to start on the 3rd chapter when he felt the telltale signs of a shunshin coming and slammed the book into a drawer. When he saw who the two in the middle of the whirlwind were, he sighed and put his head in his hands as he shook his head. Alright, what the hell have you two blown up, destroyed, or broken this time? Hokage-sama. The serious note in Guy's voice was virtually unheard of by Sarutobi except in the direst situations. He immediately sat up straight and waited for whatever was to come. Report Guy. Hi, Hokage-sama. We were sparring, trying out a new taijutsu style, when I accidentally kicked Naruto too hard. He flew towards a tree and disappeared into it. Sarutobi's eyes widened slightly, but he remained calm. This was bound to come one day. Better in front of Guy than someone else. Explain. Naruto stepped forward slightly, and told Sarutobi what he had told Guy about being inside the tree. The old Hokage sighed and fished his pipe out of his pocket. A moment please. They watched as he packed his pipe slowly, lit it with a mild keton jutsu, and took a long drag on it, letting the smoke plume around his head. He turned his eyes back to the two finally and nodded to himself. You two come with me. We have something to discuss. They walked out the door and Sarutobi waved to his secretary. I'll be out the rest of the day on an emergency. All meetings are cancelled. But Hokage-sama, what about the meeting with the council? Tell the council I am not at their beck and call, they are at mine. The ninjas on the council will understand. Tell them it is about the future of the village. That is all. After you notify them, take the rest of the day off. Hi Hokage-sama. He nodded to the two behind him and continued on towards his house, Naruto and Guy following silently. Sarutobi stood in the middle of his yard, his robes fluttering in a small breeze as sensei and students stood before him. He turned toward the tree that Naruto had supposedly gone into and puffed on his pipe again. Show me. Naruto looked toward the ground and shuffled his feet. I don't know if I can, sensei. It was spur of the moment. Sarutobi faced his grandson and knelt in front of him, putting his hands on his shoulders. Naruto, if you did what I think you did, it is nothing short of a miracle. Now please show me what you did. The boy nodded his head and approached the tree slowly, as if it would attack him. As he got closer his breath began to hitch, and he reached out with great hesitation, only to sigh in relief when his fingers did not sink into the bark when he touched it. His senseis, however, were not amused. Naruto, I want to see what you did. Concentrate on going into the tree. You have to want to go into the tree. You said you felt at peace in there, right? It won't hurt you. But sensei. Sarutobi steeled his expression and stood to his full height. Naruto, this is serious. You may have a power that has been dormant for centuries. We need to know if it has manifested. Now do as I say. Ha, sensei. Naruto turned around with a stoic expression on his face. He had been ordered to do this by his sensei, and while he hated to be ordered, his senseis were not to be disobeyed. He approached the tree one last time and let out a shaky breath as he concentrated and closed his eyes. I want to go into the tree. I want to go into the tree. Please don't let me fail. Sarutobi and Guy watched as the boy opened his eyes and began to melt into the tree hands first, until his whole body disappeared. Sarutobi stepped forward and rubbed the tree where his grandson had disappeared. Naruto? Can you hear me? A disembodied voice answered him. Hi, sensei. I can hear you. You know, you look even older in black and white, every wrinkle is shown clearly. Sarutobi smirked and smacked the tree hard. What was that for? The tree didn't do anything to you. That didn't hurt you, did it? No, it just sent vibrations through me. Hey, let me try something. I'm gonna try to move around. Sarutobi stepped back and waited for results. Guy merely stood agape. He had never known this was possible. Sure, some ninjas could move through the ground with chakra, but to be able to just phase into something without a conscious thought, it was unheard of. Naruto stared with wonder again as he played around with his new ability. His grandfather had taught him to analyze things when he found something new, and he was currently checking out everything about his body in this black and white world. His clothing, or anything that was an extension of himself, came with him. He turned his hands this way and that, looking at them from every angle before smiling. He'd heard from his grandfather that there were certain Doton techniques that allowed one to move through the ground by displacing the earth around them with chakra. After all, a ninja couldn't truly dematerialize. That would mean they weren't corporeal at all, but instead, were a ghost. He'd heard that Hatake Kakashi was fond of the headhunter jutsu, and used it to confuse his enemies. A thought came to Naruto suddenly, and he called out to his grandfather. Hey Gigi. Can you sense my chakra signature? Sarutobi listened to the disembodied voice and concentrated on where Naruto was. He couldn't detect even a faint trace. No, I can't. It's almost like you're truly part of the tree. Naruto emerged from a branch above them, his face visible. This is pretty cool. But how did I get such a power? You don't have it, and neither do Mom and Dad. Sarutobi winced and Guy looked anywhere but Naruto. The boy frowned. They were hiding something from him again. His grandfather's voice came slow, but steady. Naruto, that is something we will discuss in the near future, but not right now. You aren't ready to hear such things just yet. Please trust me. The boy's scowl deepened further, but he nodded in consent. It wasn't the first time secrets had been held from him. His face melted back into the tree and Sarutobi and Guy searched for his chakra signature again. Naruto slid his way through the tree towards the ground at a somewhat moderate pace. He wanted to see if the tree was the only thing he could disappear into or not. As he approached the ground, he felt a slight resistance before his body adjusted to the new substance, and he continued along, underneath his two senseis, before rising slowly behind them. Sarutobi and Guy were concentrating on the tree and not paying attention to what was behind them, when they felt Naruto's chakra behind them and turned to face two kunai to their faces. You'd both be dead right now if you hadn't been searching for me. Guy smiled largely, and so did Sarutobi. This was the greatest stealth technique ever. Before Naruto could try to melt into something again, Sarutobi told them both to follow him to his study. Student and sensei did as told and made their way to the front door, following behind the now light-footed Hokage. Sarutobi beckoned both of them to a seat and took a chair in front of them. He thought it might take a while and have several interruptions from an overly excited Naruto, so he packed his pipe with a little extra tobacco. After letting the plumes of smoke encircle his head, he eyed the two before him. Naruto, Guy, what you just witnessed is an S-class secret. Neither of you are to discuss it with anyone but me until I deem otherwise. Naruto, what you hold is a Kekai Genkai of a most unusual and coveted nature. You have the ability to melt into any substance you wish, hence why it is known as the melt. I don't want you flaunting it to others, am I clear? Naruto nodded and became serious himself. Hi, sensei. But how do you know about this when no one else in the family has it? It's not something that just pops up on its own. Sarutobi sighed and decided to try to defuse the situation. He didn't want to explain to a 7-year-old that he was adopted. In a couple years, yes, maybe, but not now. One revelation at a time. Naruto, as I've said before, I'll tell you in due time. Now, we're going to conduct several experiments. I want you to take this book and try to melt into it while holding it. Naruto took the thick tome offered him and his hand began to melt into it, stopping at the elbow. He looked at the book quizzically and tried to force more of himself in. No go. Sarutobi nodded and took the book back, Naruto's arm emerging as it left. It seems that the object has to be able to hold your mass for you to melt completely into it, but even that is a most advantageous skill to have. You could avoid jutsus and strikes very easily if applied correctly. Now let's talk a little about your training from here on out. We'll have to change things up slightly so that you can train your Kekai Genkai as well. The two before him nodded and Sarutobi turned to Guy. Is there anything you'd like to add, Guy? Hi Hokage-sama. Naruto-kun, I expect you to train twice as hard since you now have an advantage over other ninjas, but I don't want you to abuse it. You must not become a sole practitioner of one skill like those of the Byakugan and Sharingan. Do not let your Kekai Genkai define you. Sarutobi nodded and clapped his hands slightly. Very well put, Guy. I agree, Naruto, you should not rely on this new power solely because you have it. It would only limit your growth. Instead, learn when to apply it and let it be a trump card. Flaunting it will only bring your ruin as everyone will know what to expect of you. Don't be afraid to show your true power when necessary, but do not flaunt that power. Don't be a show-off is what I'm trying to say. Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head. But sensei, when have I ever been a show-off? Whenever you're around Kiba. The boy turned away from his senseis and slowly melted into the floor. Sarutobi yelled at him before he disappeared completely. We're not through here, I'll have you know. That strange disembodied voice answered him back. I know, sensei. I'm just seeing what I can do inside the house. The two adults watched as he popped in and out of the walls and ceiling for several minutes, before erupting from the ground quickly and reclaiming his chair. This ability is pretty cool. I'll have to work on it a lot. Hi, you will. Now let's discuss your new training regimen. We're going to have to completely overhaul it to make room for everything plus your duties at the tower. Naruto groaned and hung his head. He hated paperwork. Guy slapped him on the back and grinned at the boy's misfortune. Now, Naruto-kun. It's not so bad. Tell you what. Since today was our day for taijutsu, we'll take the rest of the day off and just relax. You can do whatever you want to do. But next time we'll redouble our efforts. A light suddenly seemed to turn on in his head and Guy beamed down at his young student. I believe I have a style for you. Excuse me, I must go and study on it. If you can make it work, you will be extremely powerful. YOSH. I must go now to prove Naruto-kun's springtime of youth. He took off out of the room like a shot, leaving a wide-eyed Hokage and Naruto. Did he just make up a new way of expressing his youthfulness? Sarutobi reached over and whacked Naruto on the head with a book before leaning back again. I won't have you speaking like that in this house. Naruto apologized and hung his head. He just realized what he'd said out loud. The next day was a busy one for Naruto. Sarutobi told Guy to take him out to one of the remote training areas and practice his new ability. Guy had taken them for what seemed like miles before stopping beside a river. Guy turned to Naruto and grinned. YOSH. This is where we will train you in your new skills today, Naruto-kun. I have here a list of everything to have you try, and we will start now. Guy-sensei, you scared off the wildlife for over a mile. It doesn't matter. They'll return once they recognize my flames of youth will not harm them. Now I want you to melt into the ground again here and try to make it to this marker I'm going to set up as fast as you can. Guy raced over 100 feet away and jammed a flag in the ground before standing upright with a stopwatch. Ready? Go! Naruto melted into the ground as quickly as possible and sped as fast as he could toward the flag. He emerged from the ground beside the flag and, once his feet were solidly above ground, Guy stopped the watch. 10 seconds. That is not very good, since I know that you can run much faster than that. While this technique is very stealthy, it does not contain speed yet. We'll have to work on that. But do not be discouraged, my pupil. For I have a secret weapon to help that will mesh well with your Kekai Genkai. Naruto perked up upon hearing this and looked at Guy with hopeful eyes. Perhaps, this would be the one he could use. But it won't be very useful unless we increase your speed and strength. This style will use a lot of agility and strength, not to mention dexterity. You'll have to learn to grapple, but that will all come in due time. Now, my student, you will continue to train in your ability. You have shown that you can melt into solids, let us now try liquids. Stand on the water and try to melt into it, become one with it, let your springtime of youth shine. Guy-sensei, don't be so loud. Guy nodded and watched as Naruto walked out into the middle of the pond with little effort, concentrated for a bit, and fell into the water. Guy bellowed with laughter as his pupil climbed out of the water, soaking wet. It appears that liquids are beyond your ability, Naruto-kun. Solids are the only friends of your uniqueness. Let's try to beat your time as we move on to different grounds. I want to see how you can move in solid rock. Naruto nodded and melted into the ground again. He needed to get this down to second nature. 6 months can change a lot of things. After several experiments at their unofficial training ground, Guy and Naruto found themselves now tasked with integrating Naruto into his Kekai Genkai. His speed with the melting ability was, as Guy said, adequate for the moment, and they now were concentrating on other things. Guy insisted that basic karate would work fine until he found a style that he could work into everything, but for now, they'd work on grappling. What Naruto didn't know is what that would entail. Currently, they sat with Sarutobi, in the Hokage's office with the TV in front of them. Guy, ever the epitome of seriousness, stood to the side of the device while holding a remote control. I want the two of you to keep an open mind now. I have an idea that this could work wonders with Naruto's ability. Just keep an open mind. Naruto and Sarutobi exchanged a confused look and turned their attention back to the TV as Guy slid a tape in. The eccentric Jounin had thrown virtually every fighting style possible at Naruto. What could possibly be so silly that they would ridicule it? But then again, they were dealing with Guy. An hour later, Sarutobi was puffing away on his pipe, watching Naruto jaw with his teacher. That? Guy-sensei, you want me to learn that? That's it? Stupid? Yeah. It's stupid. That stuff is fake. There's no way it would work. Guy nodded and stood up, ejecting the tape. Hokage-sama, I want the two of you to follow me to your yard. I don't want anyone else to see this. Naruto swallowed hard, thinking he had made his sensei angry. Sarutobi merely quirked an eyebrow and nodded to Guy, following him out. He seemed to be following the strange man a lot lately. Guy stood with his hands on his hips, his face a note of pure seriousness. Hokage-sama, please produce a few kage bunshins for me. I want to demonstrate something. Sarutobi nodded and made 5 bunshins, which all encircled Guy. Naruto swung his head back and forth between his two senseis. I've read about that jutsu before. What is a kage bunshin? I'll explain later. Pay attention to your sensei. Naruto nodded begrudgingly and turned to Guy. This, Naruto-kun, is most definitely not fake. The moves I'm about to perform are extremely dangerous and, when used right, can be debilitating. Now watch. Naruto watched in silence as the first clone approached Guy, only to suddenly look about as the man disappeared with pure speed. It found itself hoisted into the air, Guy's arms locked around its waist from behind, and its head and shoulders impacted with the ground as the green-clad man bent backwards. Guy leapt to his feet and ran at another clone, jumping into the air and drilling into its chest with a dropkick. Naruto's jaw was slack. The moves had appeared so fake on television. The men would get back up after moves that would most certainly kill a normal human and kept on fighting. It was choreographed, and yet ninjas did the impossible all the time. He watched as Guy grabbed another clone's neck in a headlock, threw its arm over his shoulder, and lifted it into the air before bringing it back to the earth, the top of its skull planted to the ground. Guy locked his legs around another clone's neck before swinging backwards and dragging it headfirst into the ground with his weight. It disappeared and the last clone eyed him warily. It flashed behind him, but Guy leapt into the air with a backflip and brought his foot down onto the clone's neck at the base of the skull, dispelling it. He turned to his slackjawed student and gave his good guy pose. YOSH. You see? You should never mock another man's skills, no matter how choreographed they seem. Those moves are just as deadly in a real fight as they are on TV. You just have to know how to apply them. Naruto's brain finally caught back up and he ran in front of his sensei, wide-eyed and hungry for knowledge. Guy-sensei, what were those moves? When can I learn? And how will I apply them with the melt? Haha, my adorable student. Those were professional wrestling moves. The first was a move known as a German suplex, a move that concentrates on an opponent's skull and shoulders. The second was a simple dropkick, the third was a brainbuster, self-explanatory, and the fourth is known as a hurricanrana, a move made popular in lucha libre. The fifth is a personal favorite of mine. It is known as the Pele and can be done anywhere at any time. Now, still don't want to learn? Sarutobi laughed at the two's enthusiasm. It was quite contagious. It was now Naruto's 8th birthday and all his friends had attended again. He and Shikamaru were engaged in a battle of wits in Shugi, and he smiled as everyone watched. After almost a year of trying, he had Shikamaru backed into a corner. Unfortunately for Naruto, he had forgotten about the boy's thinking pose and soon found himself handed another loss. Damn, I should have remembered to tie his hands. Good game, Naruto, but you still haven't got there yet. I had to use my pose 3 times though. Naruto accepted his loss gracefully, and sat down beside Hinata to enjoy some cake. His thoughts went back to the past year. First and foremost in his mind was his Kekkei Genkai. He still had a lot of work to do on it, but he had time. He was only 8 and yet, with the workload he had, he felt so much older. He'd learned so many things and then again, he hadn't. He'd been so preoccupied on the melt that he hadn't learned more than a handful of new jutsus. He had begun to learn a bit of the moves Guy-sensei had shown him, but they were coming along slowly. He simply wasn't fast enough or strong enough for them to do any damage. He did incorporate the Pele into his repertoire though. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and usually was a knockout blow. He had become faster with the melt, and could now move from one substance to another with little difficulty. They'd found that it did indeed not allow movement through water and other liquids, but then, everything has its limits. While inside whatever he was hiding in, he had virtually no chakra signature. A good bonus for an assassin or a spy. The Hokage had even brought in a Hyuga to scan the room while he hid, and the man had detected no additional people in the room. The melt was indeed a strong asset, but true to his promise, Naruto focused on other things. He increased his speed and strength training regimen, trying to get up to his and his sensei's high standards. His workload at the tower had increased, and it wasn't strange to see him and Sarutobi working late. His studies under Yahiko had suffered, but Naruto made up for it by reading in his spare time. A low point for the entire village had been the massacre of the Uchiha clan by one Uchiha Itachi. Naruto felt sorry for the only remaining survivor and had prayed that the souls of the Uchihas go to heaven, even if they didn't like him. He tried to get through to Sasuke, but the boy had only grown colder toward him, as if he was to blame. Naruto would never understand it. Sarutobi had tried to get the boy a caretaker, but he had vehemently denied that he needed one. As an Uchiha, it would be shameful for him to rely on anyone else, he had said. He had only grown more introverted and angry as time passed. Ino still hadn't spoken to him. Her father apologized profusely, but Naruto waved him off. If Ino wanted to be difficult, then she could be difficult. It was her loss. He hoped one day to get his friend back though, even if she was bossy. To Naruto, his life was good, but full of responsibilities, and he didn't have nearly as much fun as he would like to have, but then again, that made the times he was able to play all the more special. If only he was able to play with his friends more often. The party soon ended and Sarutobi approached Naruto with his hands behind his back once again. I hope you've had a happy birthday, Naruto, because tomorrow you have a new duty at the tower. Guard duty? No. You'll be helping me with my paperwork on a more personal scale. Naruto frowned. But Gigi, I already help with your paperwork. And that's where your present comes in. Sarutobi produced a rubber stamp and an ink pad from behind his back with a devilish grin. Welcome to your first year of stamping documents, Naruto. To make up for this new workload, I'll teach you a new jutsu that you've been craving to learn. The boy leaned in eagerly, the smile on his face brightening the whole house. Sarutobi smiled and stood back upright, his hands behind his back again. I'll be teaching you Kage Bunshin as soon as you learn the theory and all applications behind it. Naruto couldn't have cared less what he had to learn to get the jutsu. As Naruto lay in bed, melting in and out of the mattress out of boredom, he wondered what the next year could be like. Konohamaru was starting to get to the point where he wanted to be like his big brother, and it annoyed and made Naruto happy at the same time. He loved Konohamaru, but he was such a brat sometimes. With a sigh, he picked up a book on ancient weapons and began to flip through the pages, looking at the pictures. His grandfather had said his Kekai Genkai was meant for spies and assassins, and while the thought should have revolted him, it didn't. The melt was a part of him, and if that was its purpose, then he would use it to its full potential. The only thing he was apprehensive about was his first kill. He didn't know how he'd take it, and that worried him. He didn't want to break down and blubber like a baby, but Sarutobi had told him not to worry about it. His first kill wouldn't come for a few more years, the old man had said. Naruto blinked as he ran through the pages, searching for inspiration for a weapon. He needed something that would suit his Kekai Genkai and help with his taijutsu. He needed something simple, yet elegant, deadly, yet subtle. Kunai weren't meant for slitting throats from behind, and as an assassin that would be paramount. He'd been allowed to read up on the melt a bit, and had found that it had originated in the now-defunct Whirlpool country. That only raised several more questions. His parents were Sarutobis, and his name was Uzumaki. He'd never really thought about it till now, but it was starting to bug him. No one in his family looked like him. Hell, he looked more like the Yondaime before his brain was about to explode from too much thought. He stopped on a particular page and photo. There was his weapon. A slim, matte black blade almost 8 inches long with one razor-sharp edge, serrated near the hilt. Leather-wrapped 4-inch handle that screamed, "Hold me." That blade was made for him. It was deadly. It was brutal. It was sublime. It was him. He put his hand over the photo and ran it across the page. This was what he'd been searching for. This was his weapon. He earmarked the page and put the book on the nightstand. He'd need to visit the forge the next day to have it commissioned. Sarutobi glanced over at his grandson as they sat on their lunch break. The boy hadn't even touched his sandwich, opting instead to slip through a scroll in a book. His curiosity got the better of him, and he sat his sandwich on the platter and turned to Naruto. "What exactly are you doing over there? Your lunch is going to go bad." Naruto looked up from his scroll and grinned. "I'm trying to, what was that word? Oh yeah. Multitask. I'm multitasking." Sarutobi quirked an eyebrow and rolled his hand in a continuing gesture. "And? On what?" "I'm reading up on the Kage Bunshin and its applications and abilities while also reading up a bit on a certain weapon I found interesting." Sarutobi perked up instantly. "And that is?" Naruto opened the book up to the page the knife was on, and Sarutobi looked hard at it. It was so plain looking, and yet it was exactly what he had imagined the other Uzumakis might have used. Perhaps it was ingrained in the boy's blood. He tried to read the excerpt under the picture but found it was in another language. "So, what is it?" "It was called a field knife, I believe. The blade is about 8 inches and the hilt is 4. Sarutobi nodded and sat back in his chair. "That's a pretty big blade, especially for someone as small as you. Do you think you can handle it?" "Ah, come on, sensei. Swords are way bigger than that, and I can hold a sword easy." Hi, but knives and daggers are one-handed use, and that is a foot-long knife. Knives also require a subtle finesse that is usually not found in swords. To use a knife, you have to be willing to get in close and get in the enemy's face. Swords allow a bit of distance still, but with a knife you are almost guaranteed to be cut. Naruto frowned and went back to reading his scroll. I don't care. That knife is the only thing to catch my attention, and I'm going to have one commissioned. I think I'll do great with it. My Kekai Genkai is bred for stealth and assassinations anyway, so I need something that can do the things I need to do. Such as? Naruto sighed and looked back at his grandfather with a sad look. It's not something I want to do, but I've come to the realization that I'll have to kill at some point. It's unavoidable. It comes with our profession. I need something that will help me kill my enemies quickly and as painlessly as possible, and I think that this knife will do it. I'd rather my enemies not suffer if possible. Sarutobi nodded and took a sip of tea. That is a good attitude to have, Naruto. No one wants to kill, except the depraved and the bloodthirsty. It's good to seek other solutions before you have to fight, but realizing you may have to kill is a start toward maturity. It's hopefully something you'll never come to enjoy, just something that, as a ninja, you learn to deal with. Naruto nodded and turned back to his scroll, but Sarutobi wasn't through yet. What have you learned so far about Kage Bunshin? I've learned that it splits chakra evenly between bodies. It's a jutsu that has many functions, the least of which is multiple bodies, turning a ninja into a one-man army. But the chakra cost is high, so not many can do it effectively or to a degree that makes it worthwhile. The information-gathering aspect of it, though, is what catches my attention. Sarutobi folded his hands and leaned forward on his desk. It always brought him joy when Naruto learned by himself. It says in the notes you gave me that a Kage Bunshin, once dispelled, returns its memories and anything learned to the maker. It's great for spying, and that has been documented. But the learning aspect can also be applied to training apparently, and that is what makes me eager to learn it. Why? Sensei, imagine it. I have a larger than natural chakra pool to pull from. If I could create a lot of bunshins, then I could learn jutsus faster, read material more quickly, and study faster, all in the same amount of time. It has unlimited potential. The things one can do with this jutsu, and yet, the only drawback is an unnaturally high draw on chakra. But my level negates that, and Sensei, you have to teach me this. Sarutobi nodded and puffed on his pipe. I'll show it to you this evening when we get home. It would be a boon to your studies very greatly. Speaking of which, how are your studies at home going? Slowly. I've been reading up on seals in my spare time, but the literature on them is sparse and limited to sealing scrolls. I've made a couple myself, but I know there is more to it than that. You've been making seals unsupervised? Naruto, that is extremely dangerous. If you mess up even one, there's no telling what could happen. Hi, I know. But I have to try it. Sealing interests me and I'd like to learn more. If Kage Bunshin works like the theory says it will, then I can learn more and become more diverse. I want to learn. Sarutobi stared at his grandson and puffed on his pipe long and hard. I'll allow you to look a bit more into sealing, but only if I'm present. There aren't many seal masters in the world, Naruto, and it is a very dangerous, but very fulfilling art to pursue. You must promise to be careful. I promise. Good. Now, what about your training with Guy? How is that going? Naruto huffed and sat back in his chair with crossed arms. Remember the wrestling Guy Sensei showed us? Well, most of it isn't practical in a battle. I'm not nearly as fast as he is, so doing any of those moves leaves me open to attack. Hand signs are still doable if the hands are left unchecked, and a kawarimi is possible if the ninja can do it sealsly. I have incorporated a few of the more unorthodox strikes into my repertoire, however. Ah yes, Guy said you had perfected the Pele into an art form. He said it is poetry in motion when you do it. I think that's taking it a little far, but it is a move I enjoy greatly. No one ever expects it. I have taken to Kalaripe it, and it has been the easiest taijutsu to accommodate me. But wrestling, unless I get taller and stronger, will be beyond me. Grappling is still a part of both the taijutsu and the melt, however. Yes, well, we can't all be freakish physical specimens like Guy. Don't worry, you're young yet. Now, show me that knife again. It intrigues me. Naruto shined the two of them home as quickly as possible, and was practically bouncing up and down as he waited for his lesson. Sarutobi stood with his hands behind his back, a smile on his face. It was so wonderful teaching. The two heard the sound of the door sliding open, and Konohamaru came bounding out into the yard. I want to learn too. Naruto ruffled his brother's hair and grinned. Sorry, Ototo. You're too little to learn this. But when you're old enough, I'll show you how to do it, okay? Konohamaru sat down and began to pout. But I want to learn now. Gigi says I need to learn early, so why can't I learn this? Sarutobi laughed at his grandsons and shook his head. Konohamaru, have you unlocked your chakra yet? No. Have you started being a ninja yet? No. Then I'm afraid I can't teach you this technique yet. I'll show it to you when you're older, okay? But I want to learn with an Ikki. And one day you will. Now, please stand back and I'll show Naruto how to do this. Konohamaru went and sat down on the porch and watched with his cheeks in his hands. He wanted to be a ninja too. Sarutobi chuckled and turned back to Naruto. Now you learned the theory faster than I thought you would. Let's see if you can apply it. First, there is only one hand seal to make a Kage Bunshin. Seriously? I thought with as powerful as it is, there would be more seals. Not so much. Several powerful techniques only take a couple of hand seals. It's the chakra capacity that makes them unusable to most. Now form this cross seal. Naruto mimicked his grandfather to the T. Now, push as much chakra into it as you can so we can see where you stand. Don't worry about wasting chakra at first. We'll get the load of chakra down later. Guy has told me you can do the water walking exercise quite well now. We'll have to move up to something more unorthodox. Anyway, before I go off on a tangent, push as much chakra as you can into the jutsu. Naruto nodded and began to channel chakra into the jutsu. He concentrated hard and pushed with all his might. When he heard his grandfather and Konohamaru gasp, he opened his eyes and did a little gaping of his own. He'd been taught that the hand signs were simply a focus to help the chakra flow better and manipulate easier. He'd been doing chakra exercises since he was little, so he knew his control was good. He knew his chakra wells were extremely large for a kid his age. So he had expected, with the amount of chakra the move took, to make a couple bunshin. What he found were almost 10, looking around confused. Sarutobi walked forward and grabbed one by the arm, surprising it and causing it to jerk away. Hey old man, what was that for? Sarutobi quirked an eyebrow and glared at Naruto. The boy rubbed the back of his head and grinned. It wasn't me? I'll be taking this one and walking around to the front of the house. I'm going to tell it something and I want you to tell me what I said when I come back. Naruto nodded and watched as the clone and his grandfather walked around the corner. A couple minutes later, images of his grandfather whispering in his ear came into his mind and he blushed, causing Konohamaru to tilt his head in confusion. Sarutobi emerged in a swirl of leaves not a few seconds later, and Naruto glared at the man. You are a dirty old man, Gigi. Mom will be angry when she finds out what you told me. If you want to continue learning jutsus, I suggest you keep what I told you to yourself. I'll be good. That's what I thought. Now I want you to practice with this a bit more. Have the clones do some chakra exercises and you'll see an improvement if they do them right. I'm starving and I'm going to dinner. Come on, Konohamaru, we'll leave your brother to his own devices. Naruto stared at all his clones and they stared back. He raised a hand and waved. Hi. The clones waved back and said hello in a collective voice. So what should I do now? One clone shrugged and grinned. We dunno. You're the boss. How about the leaf exercise? Naruto thought for a second and then grinned. Nah, that's too easy. I've got a better idea. He bent over and picked up a few pebbles from the ground, tossing them in his hands.